You may be the only conscious mind. You may be the only conscious mind moving through a world that looks populated but feels strangely distant when you stare at it long enough. This idea suggests that every other person you encounter could be an appearance rather than an experience, a perfectly functioning body without an inner life like yours. They speak, react, suffer, and smile, but you can never step inside their awareness to confirm it is truly there. All you ever have direct access to is your own consciousness. Every sound, color, emotion, and thought arrives filtered through your perception alone. Other minds are not experienced, they are inferred. You assume they exist because they look like you, behave like you, and tell you they do. But this assumption is an act of faith, not proof. Your inner world is immediate, undeniable, vivid. Everyone else's inner world is a story you tell yourself to make reality coherent. When someone describes their pain, you understand it only by mapping it onto your own experiences. Their consciousness is always secondhand, never directly felt. This idea becomes unsettling when you realize how easily the world would function even if no one else were truly aware. Conversations would still happen. Love would still appear real. Suffering would still look convincing. Nothing would collapse outwardly, only inwardly. If this were true, responsibility would feel heavier. Kindness would become more disturbing. Cruelty would feel hollow. Every interaction would be you, alone, responding to reflections that can never confirm they are looking back. Reality could be a discarded simulation. Reality could be a discarded simulation, not a masterpiece in progress, but an abandoned experiment left running long after its creators lost interest. This idea suggests the universe was not designed for meaning, fairness, or even observation, but as a temporary model that outlived its purpose. What you experience may be leftover computation, background noise in a system no one bothered to shut down. If this is true, the randomness of existence stops feeling accidental. Suffering, inefficiency, and absurdity begin to resemble glitches rather than design. Civilizations rise and fall not because they matter, but because the simulation continues to iterate without oversight. There is no narrative arc, no audience watching, no final evaluation, only persistence. Your life, in this view, is not being tested or judged. It is simply running. Consciousness itself could be an unintended side effect, a process that emerged when complexity crossed a threshold the designers never anticipated. You are not a character, you are a process executing inside forgotten code. This possibility strips comfort from purpose, but replaces it with something colder and more intimate. If the simulation is discarded, then nothing you do is being measured, yet everything you feel is real to you. Pain is not meaningful, but it is undeniable. Joy is not rewarded, but it still floods your awareness. Existing inside abandoned machinery means there is no higher correction coming, no reset, no intervention, only experience unfolding because the system hasn't stopped yet. Time might not move at all. Time might not move at all, even though it feels like it carries you forward every second. This idea suggests that the flow of time is not a feature of reality, but a construction of the mind, a sensation created by memory, updating itself moment by moment. Nothing is actually progressing. Everything simply exists, already complete. What you experience as motion through time may be consciousness scanning a fixed landscape. The past does not vanish, and the future does not approach. They are already there, equally real, while your awareness drifts across them in a narrow sequence. The feeling of now is not a moving point, but a spotlight, illuminating one slice of existence while leaving the rest in darkness. Change, then, is not something happening to the universe, but something happening to you. Your body ages, your thoughts shift, your memories rearrange, creating the illusion that reality itself is transforming. But underneath that perception, nothing may be unfolding at all. every event that will ever occur may already be written into the structure of existence. This idea becomes unsettling when you consider choice. If time does not move, then decisions are not made in real time but revealed. You do not choose what happens next. You discover which moment you are about to experience. Free will feels real because you cannot see the whole structure, only the single frame you are conscious of right now. The future does not wait for you. It already exists, silent and untouched, while you move through it believing you are moving forward. The universe may exist only when observed. The universe may exist only when observed, meaning reality itself could depend on awareness to come into being. This idea suggests that the world is not a solid, continuous structure running independently in the background, but something that crystallizes into existence only at the moment it is perceived. Without observation, there may be no definite state at all, only possibility. Every time you look at something, hear a sound, or feel your body, reality sharpens into form. When you are not paying attention, the universe may loosen, blur, or even vanish entirely, not because it stops existing in a dramatic way, but because existence without awareness may be indistinguishable from non-existence. Observation could be the act that collapses uncertainty into experience. This possibility is disturbing because it places consciousness at the center of everything. Mountains, stars, and histories may not be permanent objects, but recurring events triggered by perception. The universe might not be waiting patiently for observers, it might require them. Without someone to witness it, there may be no there at all. If this is true, then reality is not stable in the way it appears. It is constantly being recreated, refreshed, or rendered in response to awareness. The world you trust may be more like a performance than a structure, existing only while someone is watching. When you close your eyes, the universe may not continue the way you imagine it does. It may simply pause, unresolved, until awareness returns and calls it back into being. Free will could be a post-hoc illusion. Free will could be a post-hoc illusion, a story your mind tells itself after actions have already been set in motion. This idea suggests that decisions do not originate from a conscious chooser, but emerge from processes far below awareness, with consciousness stepping in only to take credit once the outcome is unavoidable. Before you become aware of choosing, your brain may have already decided. Neural activity rises, patterns align, and behavior is prepared long before the feeling of "I chose this" appears. That feeling may not be the cause of action, but the explanation layered on top of it, constructed to preserve the sense of control. This illusion feels convincing because it is experienced in real time. You feel yourself weighing options, imagining futures, and selecting a path. Yet this deliberation may itself be part of the mechanism, not a commander, but another cog. The mind narrates intention because a world without authorship would feel unstable and frightening. If free will is post hoc, responsibility becomes strange. You still act, still cause harm or kindness, but not from an independent self-steering events. You are a point where countless influences converge: biology, memory, environment, expressing themselves as choice. What makes this unsettling is not the loss of freedom, but the loss of ownership. You may not be the origin of your actions, only the witness to them. The sense of "I decided" may arise only after the decision is already part of reality, leaving consciousness to arrive late, signing its name on events it did not initiate. You experience a survival-optimized hallucination. You experience a survival-optimized hallucination, not reality as it truly is, but reality as your brain needs it to be. What you see, hear, and feel is not a neutral window into the world. It is a carefully engineered interpretation shaped by millions of years of evolution. Accuracy was never the goal. Survival was. Your senses do not reveal truth. They construct usefulness. Colors are not properties of objects, but signals invented by the brain to help you distinguish threats from safety. Solid objects feel solid not because you touch reality itself, but because your nervous system translates invisible forces into something manageable. Even space and time may be mental shortcuts, simplified models that keep you alive rather than informed. This means you are not perceiving the world. You are navigating a simulation generated inside your skull. The brain continuously predicts what it expects to encounter and corrects itself only when prediction fails. Most of what you experience is guesswork filled in automatically, a controlled hallucination that feels seamless because it works. The unsettling part is realizing how little of reality you actually need to see in order to function. Entire layers of existence could surround you unnoticed because they offer no survival advantage. Truth that does not help you live is filtered out before it ever reaches awareness. When fear distorts your perception, when time seems to slow, when pain sharpens reality, you glimpse the system adjusting itself in real time. Reality bends not to what is true, but to what keeps you alive. You do not inhabit the world itself. You inhabit a version of it designed to protect a fragile organism, pretending it understands what it sees. Consciousness may create matter, not emerge from it. Consciousness may create matter, not emerge from it, reversing one of the deepest assumptions you have ever been taught. Instead of awareness being a byproduct of brains, neurons, and chemistry, matter itself may be something that consciousness produces in order to experience itself. The physical world would not be the foundation of reality, but its expression. In this view, thoughts are not tiny sparks trapped inside a biological machine. They are primary. Space, time, and objects arise as structures within awareness, not outside of it. Matter becomes a stable pattern of perception, something consciousness generates to create continuity, limitation, and form. The universe feels solid, not because it exists independently, but because consciousness renders it consistently. This idea destabilizes the way you understand your body. Your brain would not be the source of your awareness, but an interface, a symbol inside experience rather than the engine behind it. When the brain changes, consciousness appears to change, not because it is produced there, but because the interface is altered. Like a distorted lens, the signal remains while the image shifts. If consciousness is fundamental, then the universe is not a dead mechanism that accidentally woke up. It is awareness exploring itself through matter, using form to generate contrast, separation, and perspective. Objects exist because they are experienced, not the other way around. This makes existence feel intimate and unsettling. Reality is no longer something you are inside of. It is something happening within awareness itself, with no clear boundary between observer and world. Infinite versions of you may exist. Infinite versions of you may exist, scattered across realities that look almost identical but diverge in ways you will never witness. This idea suggests that every decision, accident, hesitation, or chance outcome splits existence into new paths, each one containing a version of you who continued differently. You are not unique in being you. You are only unique in which version you are aware of. Some of these versions made better choices. Some made worse ones. Some never reached this moment at all. Yet they are not imaginary. They are just inaccessible. Your consciousness is locked onto a single thread, giving the illusion of a singular life, while countless other lives unfold in parallel without your knowledge. What makes this unsettling is how small your sense of self becomes. The identity you protect, regret, or take pride in may be one outcome among an immeasurable number. The person you believe you could have been may not be hypothetical at all, but fully real somewhere else, living out consequences you only feel as longing or relief. If infinite versions of you exist, then no choice is ever absolute. Every path is taken, just not by the awareness you currently inhabit. Your failures are not final. Your successes are not exclusive. They are variations, not conclusions. You are not the center of your possibilities. You are simply the version that happens to be conscious right now, while countless others continue existing without you ever knowing they do. The past may exist only as records. The past may exist only as records, not as something that is still real somewhere behind you, but as traces stored in memory, documents, photographs, and physical states that point backward without guaranteeing what they point to. This idea suggests that the past itself may be gone entirely, leaving only evidence that convinces you it once happened. Everything you believe about the past arrives through preservation. Your memories are reconstructions, not replays. Each time you recall an event, your brain rewrites it, subtly altering details to fit your current identity. History books agree only because records agree, and records agree only because they survived. What did not leave a trace may as well never have existed. If the past exists only as records, then it has no independent reality beyond what remains in the present. There is no fixed timeline stretching behind you, only a collection of clues that imply one. The universe may not carry its history with it, it may simply carry the appearance of history. This idea becomes disturbing when you realize how fragile records are. Memories can be false, evidence can be forged or lost. Entire civilizations vanish with barely a footprint. If every record disappeared, the past would disappear with it, not hidden, but erased. What you call your life story may be a constantly updated archive, convincing you of continuity while resting on information that could be incomplete, distorted, or wrong. The certainty you feel about what has been may be nothing more than trust in what remains. Death may not end experience. Death may not end experience, even if it ends the body that carries your name. This idea suggests that consciousness is not as tightly bound to biology as it appears, and that what you call you may not disappear when the brain shuts down. The body stops, the signals go quiet, but experience itself may not vanish in the way you imagine. You have never experienced non-existence. Every moment of your life has been filled with awareness of something, thought, sensation, darkness, or confusion. Even sleep does not erase experience, it only alters it. From the inside, there is no memory of nothingness. This raises an unsettling question: how would true absence ever be experienced at all? If consciousness is a process rather than a thing, death may simply interrupt one configuration and allow another. Experience could continue without memory, identity, or narrative, stripped down to raw awareness without a sense of self. There may be no you left to recognize it, yet something may still be happening. This idea is not comforting in the way traditional afterlives are comforting. There may be no reunion, no judgment, no meaning attached, just continuation without context. The fear of death then shifts from annihilation to uncertainty, experience without anchors. The moment after death, if such a moment exists from the inside, may not feel like an ending. It may feel like waking up without knowing who you are, where you are, or why anything is happening at all. Meaning may be imposed, not found. Meaning may be imposed, not found, suggesting that the universe does not come preloaded with purpose waiting to be discovered. Instead, meaning could be something the mind projects onto an otherwise indifferent reality, the way light turns empty space into visible shapes. Nothing inherently matters until consciousness decides that it does. This idea cuts deeply because it removes the comforting belief that significance is hidden somewhere beneath the surface of existence. There may be no ultimate reason behind events, no grand explanation tying everything together. The world simply happens, and the sense that it means something arises only when a conscious mind interprets it that way. Every value you hold may be an act of creation rather than discovery. Love matters because you feel it matter. Suffering feels tragic because your mind frames it as such. Even purpose may be a narrative imposed after the fact, a story that makes chaos bearable and experience coherent. This does not make meaning fake, but fragile. If meaning is imposed, it can be withdrawn, reshaped, or shattered. When belief collapses, the world does not change, only your relationship to it does. What once felt sacred can suddenly feel empty, not because reality shifted, but because the lens through which you viewed it did. If meaning is something you impose, then you are never merely searching for it. You are constantly generating it, whether you realize it or not, holding the unsettling power to decide what matters in a universe that never tells you. Identity might be memory continuity. Identity might be memory continuity, meaning the person you believe yourself to be is nothing more than a chain of remembered moments stitched together into a story. This idea suggests there is no solid self underneath your thoughts, emotions, or personality, only memories giving the illusion of something stable and permanent. You feel like the same person you were years ago because you remember being that person. If those memories vanished, the sense of identity would vanish with them. Your name, values, fears, and attachments would lose their anchor. Without memory, there would still be awareness, still experience, but no clear owner of it. Consciousness would remain, yet the you recognize would not. This becomes unsettling when you realize how fragile memory is. It fades, distorts, and rewrites itself constantly. Large parts of your past are already gone, and what remains is often inaccurate. Yet you treat these shifting recollections as proof of a continuous self. The stability of identity rests on something deeply unreliable. Every night during deep sleep or anesthesia, memory shuts down. When you wake up, identity resumes not because the same self persisted, but because the story continued where it left off. The gap is invisible, so it feels seamless. If identity is memory continuity, then you are not a fixed being moving through time. You are a narrative updating itself moment by moment, convincing awareness that it has always been the same character, even as the contents of that character quietly change. The self may not exist. The self may not exist as a real, stable entity, even though it feels like the most obvious thing in the world. This idea suggests that what you call you is not a central controller or an inner owner of experience, but a pattern that emerges temporarily from thoughts, memories, and sensations interacting with each other. There may be experience, but no experiencer behind it. When you look closely, the self is never found directly. You find thoughts, emotions, impulses, and perceptions all arising and fading on their own. The sense of I appears only when these elements are linked together into a narrative. It feels solid because the story repeats constantly, not because it has substance. This illusion is useful. A stable self helps the brain predict, plan, and survive. It creates continuity across time, making past actions feel connected to present identity. But usefulness does not equal truth. The self may be more like a character in a story than an actual entity living inside your mind. What makes this idea unsettling is how quickly the self can change. Moods, trauma, drugs, or neurological damage can alter personality, values, and behavior. If the self were real and fixed, it would not dissolve so easily. There may be awareness without ownership, experience without a center. The feeling of being someone could be a side effect of cognition, not its core, leaving you as an ongoing process rather than a thing that exists. Morality could be biological fiction. Morality could be biological fiction, a deeply convincing story written by evolution to keep social creatures alive. This idea suggests that right and wrong are not woven into the fabric of the universe, but into the nervous system, emerging as instincts long before they became philosophies. What feels like moral truth may simply be survival strategy wearing the mask of certainty. Feelings of guilt, fairness, outrage, and compassion arise automatically, not through reasoning, but through biology. They evolved because groups that protected one another, punished cheaters, and rewarded cooperation survived more reliably than those that didn't. Over time, these emotional reactions hardened into moral intuitions that feel absolute and non-negotiable. This is what makes morality feel sacred. You don't experience it as an opinion. You experience it as something obvious, as if the universe itself agrees with you. But another species, another culture, or another evolutionary path could produce entirely different moral instincts that feel just as undeniable to them. The disturbing implication is that moral certainty may not track moral truth. You feel that something is wrong not because it violates a cosmic rule, but because your brain is signaling a threat to social stability. Even moral progress may simply be shifting biological incentives rather than discovering deeper truths. If morality is fiction, it is not weak. It is powerful. It shapes behavior, justifies violence, inspires sacrifice, and gives meaning to suffering. The fiction works so well because you cannot step outside it. You don't choose your moral reactions. You experience them fully convinced they are real, because believing they are real is what kept your ancestors alive. You might already be dead. You might already be dead, and what you are experiencing now could be the continuation of consciousness after the moment life ended. This idea suggests that death was not a dramatic cutoff, but a transition so seamless that awareness never noticed the boundary. There was no darkness, no interruption, no final frame, just experience flowing forward as if nothing happened. From inside consciousness, there is no clear marker for non-existence. You only ever experience being aware. If death occurred, awareness would not experience the absence of experience. It would only experience whatever came next. This makes it possible that what you call life is actually an afterimage, a stabilized continuation of perception beyond physical death. The world's strange familiarity begins to feel unsettling under this lens. Reality often feels slightly off, repetitive, fragmented, or dreamlike. Time blurs, memories feel unstable, meaning feels both urgent and hollow. These could be signs not of a living world, but of a constructed continuity designed to keep awareness coherent after the body failed. If this were true, then survival instincts, fear of death, and anxiety about endings are echoes, habits carried over from a state that no longer applies. You fear something that already happened. You brace for an ending that passed unnoticed. Existing in a post-death continuity would explain why nothing ever feels fully resolved, why closure never arrives, why experience keeps unfolding without explanation. You are not moving toward death. You may be moving away from it inside a reality that exists solely because awareness never learned how to stop. Indifference does not erase meaning. Indifference does not erase meaning, even if the universe itself is cold, silent, and unconcerned with your existence. This idea suggests that meaning does not require approval, purpose, or acknowledgement from anything larger than you. It does not need to be granted by the cosmos to be real within experience. The universe does not reward effort, punish injustice, or care whether you succeed or fail. Stars explode without intention. Time passes without sympathy, yet inside this indifference, meaning still appears, quietly, stubbornly, and personally. It arises the moment something matters to you, regardless of whether it matters to anything else. What makes this idea unsettling is how it removes comfort without removing value. There is no cosmic safety net, no guarantee that meaning will be preserved or remembered. Love fades, achievements disappear. Suffering leaves no permanent mark on reality. And yet, while it is felt, it is absolute. Its impermanence does not weaken it, it intensifies it. If indifference erased meaning, nothing would ever matter. But things do matter, constantly and involuntarily. You do not choose what moves you. You only notice that it does. meaning emerges from attention, attachment, and care, not from universal design. This idea forces a confrontation with responsibility. If meaning is not provided, then it is created, not once, but continuously, in a universe that will never confirm it mattered, except in the only place it ever could. Truth may be whatever persists. Truth may be whatever persists, not what is most accurate, pure, or logically sound, but what survives pressure, repetition, and time. This idea suggests that truth is not discovered in isolation, but shaped by endurance. What lasts becomes true, not because it reflects reality perfectly, but because it resists being erased. Beliefs spread, mutate, and compete much like living organisms. Some ideas die quickly, unable to adapt or convince. Others endure for generations, embedding themselves into language, culture, and institutions. Over time, persistence masquerades as correctness. What remains feels self-evident simply because alternatives have faded away. Memory works the same way. You remember what reinforces itself through repetition and emotion, not what was most precise. Forgotten details might have been more accurate, but accuracy does not guarantee survival. What stays becomes your truth, shaping how you understand your past and justify your present. This is unsettling because it means falsehoods can harden into reality if they persist long enough. A story repeated often enough can outweigh evidence. A belief protected by power, habit, or comfort can become indistinguishable from fact. Truth, then, is not neutral. It is selective. What you accept as real may owe its status not to correspondence with the world, but to its ability to endure without collapsing. The most persistent ideas shape reality not by being right, but by refusing to disappear. Language may shape reality itself. Language may shape reality itself, not by describing the world, but by carving it into pieces you are capable of noticing. This idea suggests that words do not merely label what already exists. They actively organize experience, determining what stands out and what disappears into the background. You do not see the world first and then name it. You see what your language allows you to see. Before something has a word, it exists only as a vague sensation. Once named, it becomes solid, distinct, and shareable. Emotions sharpen when they are spoken. Objects feel more real when they are categorized. Even time becomes structured through tense, turning experience into past, present, and future. Without language, reality may be continuous and overwhelming. With language, it becomes manageable, but fragmented. This means your thoughts are confined by the vocabulary you possess. You cannot fully think what you cannot articulate. Entire forms of experience may pass through you unnoticed simply because there is no linguistic container to hold them. Different languages carve reality differently, emphasizing relationships, actions, or objects in ways that subtly reshape perception. The unsettling part is realizing how invisible this influence is. Language feels like a tool you use, not a system using you, yet it quietly dictates how you assign meaning, where you draw boundaries, and what you consider possible. When language changes, reality shifts with it. New words create new experiences. Old words lock you into inherited interpretations. You may believe you are thinking freely, but much of what you call reality is already pre-written in the sentences your mind cannot stop forming. Logic may not be universal. Logic may not be universal, even though it feels like the backbone of reality. This idea suggests that logic is not an absolute law woven into the fabric of existence, but a local tool, one that works inside certain conditions, perspectives, and scales. What makes sense to you may only make sense because your mind is built to survive within a very narrow slice of reality. The rules of logic feel inevitable because they are reinforced everywhere you look. Causes lead to effects. Contradictions feel impossible. Things are either true or false, but this certainty may come from the structure of human cognition rather than from the structure of the universe itself. Logic could be something your brain imposes in order to function, not something reality is required to obey. When you move beyond everyday experience, cracks begin to show. At extreme scales, events appear to defy intuition. Things can exist in multiple states, outcomes blur into probabilities, and clear distinctions dissolve. These are not failures of reality, but failures of the logical frameworks you rely on to interpret it. If logic is not universal, then understanding has limits that cannot be reasoned through. Some truths may be inaccessible not because you are ignorant, but because the tools you use to think are incompatible with what is being described. The universe may be internally consistent while remaining illogical to you. This idea is disturbing because it means clarity is not guaranteed. Reality may make sense only from perspectives you can never occupy, leaving you navigating existence with rules that work well enough to survive, but not well enough to fully comprehend what you are inside of. Consciousness may require suffering. Consciousness may require suffering, not as a flaw in existence, but as a condition for awareness itself. This idea suggests that without contrast, resistance and discomfort, experience would flatten into something indistinguishable from nothing. Pain may not be an accident layered onto consciousness, but the pressure that gives it shape. Awareness sharpens when something is wrong. Pleasure drifts by quietly, often unnoticed, but suffering demands attention. It pulls consciousness inward, forcing the mind to focus, to interpret, to remember. Without vulnerability, there may be no urgency. Without loss, no depth. Without discomfort, nothing to notice. This idea becomes disturbing when you realize how closely awareness and pain are linked. Much of what you remember most clearly is tied to moments of fear, grief, longing, or failure. These experiences carve deep impressions into consciousness, defining who you believe yourself to be. Joy feels real, but suffering feels undeniable. If consciousness requires suffering, then a perfectly painless existence might also be a perfectly empty one. Awareness might dissolve in the absence of friction, just as a sound fades without vibration. Suffering, in this view, is not meaningful in a moral sense, but functional in an experiential one. This does not make suffering good or justified. It makes it foundational. Consciousness may not exist despite suffering, but because something can be lost, threatened, or harmed. Awareness may arise precisely where existence is fragile enough to be felt. The future may already exist. The future may already exist, fully formed and unreachable, even though it feels like an open space waiting for your choices. This idea suggests that time is not a line being written as you move forward, but a complete structure where every moment, past, present, and future, coexists at once. You are not creating what comes next, you are approaching what is already there. From this perspective, your sense of anticipation is a limitation of awareness, not evidence of uncertainty. You cannot see the future, so it feels unreal. Yet invisibility is not non-existence. Just as distant places exist before you travel to them, future moments may exist before you experience them. This becomes unsettling when you think about decisions. Choices feel meaningful because they appear to shape outcomes, but they may simply reveal which future was always yours. The feeling of control remains, but the destination does not change. You move toward it believing you are steering. If the future already exists, regret and hope take on a strange tone. Regret mourns what was always going to happen. Hope reaches for what is already fixed. You live inside a narrow window of awareness, mistaking discovery for creation. What disturbs most is not inevitability, but intimacy. The moments that will break you, heal you, or end you may already be real somewhere in the structure of time, waiting silently while you move toward them 1 second at a time. Reality could be a shared hallucination. Reality could be a shared hallucination. something that feels solid and external only because many minds are generating the same experience at the same time. This idea suggests that the world you trust is not an objective structure standing on its own, but a synchronized mental construction, continuously reinforced through agreement and repetition. From the moment you are born, you are trained into this hallucination. You learn what colors mean, what objects are, which sensations matter, and which ones should be ignored. Others confirm your perceptions, and their confirmation gives those perceptions weight. When enough people see the same thing, it stops feeling imagined and starts feeling real. What makes this unsettling is how fragile that reality becomes when consensus cracks. Hallucinations in individuals are dismissed as disorders, but hallucinations shared by millions become culture, belief, and common sense. Entire realities can shift when enough people agree to see the world differently, even if nothing physical has changed. Your senses alone are not enough to anchor reality. You rely on others to validate what you experience. When someone disagrees, it feels threatening, as if reality itself is being challenged. This is because shared perception is the glue holding the world together. If reality is a shared hallucination, then truth is negotiated, not discovered. The world remains stable only as long as enough minds continue to imagine it the same way. The ground beneath you feels solid, not because it must be, but because everyone agrees it is. Now may never be experienced. Now may never be experienced, even though it feels like the most obvious part of existence. This idea suggests that the present moment is not something consciousness ever actually reaches, but something it reconstructs after it has already passed. By the time you are aware of anything, it is already memory. Every sensation you feel arrives with a delay. Light takes time to reach your eyes. Signals take time to travel through your nervous system. Your brain then assembles these fragments into a coherent experience and labels it now. What feels immediate is already behind you, processed and packaged into awareness after the fact. This means you are always slightly late to your own life. The present feels alive only because the delay is small enough to go unnoticed. You believe you are touching reality as it happens, but you are touching an echo, an interpretation created moments after the event itself occurred. If this is true, then the present moment is a concept, not an experience. You cannot step into it or hold it still. The instant you try to notice now, it has already slipped into the past. Consciousness chases the present endlessly without ever catching it. This realization quietly destabilizes certainty. You are never exactly where you think you are in time. You live inside a continuous replay, convinced of immediacy, while reality itself remains just out of reach, always already gone by the time you become aware of it. The mind may filter most of reality. The mind may filter most of reality, allowing you to experience only a narrow, carefully selected version of what actually exists. This idea suggests that perception is not a window opening onto the world, but a gate that blocks almost everything, letting through only what is useful enough to keep you functioning. What you see, hear, and feel is not raw reality. It is a reduced model, stripped of overwhelming detail, edited for survival rather than truth. Colors, objects, and even time itself may be simplified symbols, not accurate representations. Reality could be unimaginably dense and complex, while your mind delivers a manageable illusion you can navigate. This becomes unsettling when you realize how much must be missing. Entire layers of existence could be passing through you unnoticed, not because they are hidden, but because your brain was never built to register them. You do not see reality as it is. You see reality as you need it to be. The feeling of certainty comes from this filtering. By excluding ambiguity, the mind creates a stable world you can trust, but stability is achieved by omission. Most of what exists may be ignored so completely that it feels non-existent. If the mind truly filters most of reality, then expanding awareness is not about gaining new information, but about losing the filters that protect you, and without them, reality might not become clearer, only heavier, stranger, and far less human than you are prepared for. Growth may just be narrative change. Growth may just be narrative change, not a transformation of who you fundamentally are, but a rewriting of the story you tell about yourself. This idea suggests that personal growth does not always mean becoming better, stronger, or wiser, but becoming more skilled at interpreting your own experiences in a way that feels survivable. Events happen, many of them outside your control. Trauma, failure, success, and loss do not arrive with meaning attached. Meaning is assigned later. What you call growth may be the moment you reorganize the past into a story that no longer threatens your identity. The facts stay the same, but their emotional weight shifts. Your personality may not evolve as much as your explanations do. You don't erase pain, you reframe it. You don't remove flaws, you rename them. What once felt like weakness becomes learning. What once felt like chaos becomes a phase. The mind heals not by changing reality, but by changing interpretation. This idea becomes uncomfortable when you realize how flexible growth narratives are. Two people can live through the same experience and construct entirely different meanings from it. Neither story is more real than the other, yet both determine how life feels afterward. If growth is narrative, then identity is editorial. You are not steadily becoming someone new. You are constantly rewriting who you believe you have been. The past stays unmoved while the story bends, quietly reshaping the person you think you are now. Nothing truly begins or ends. Nothing truly begins or ends, even though your life feels framed by clear starting points and final moments. This idea suggests that what you call beginnings are merely transitions you notice, and what you call endings are places where your attention stops. Reality itself may be continuous, with no true edges, only changes in form. Birth feels like a beginning because memory starts there, not because existence does. Before you were aware, matter was already moving, conditions were already forming, causes were already in motion. Death feels like an ending for the same reason. It marks the limit of experience you can imagine, not the limit of what continues. Everything that appears to stop is actually transforming. Bodies decay into soil, heat dissipates into space, thoughts dissolve into influence and memory. Even silence is not empty, it is filled with processes you no longer track. Endings exist only relative to perspective. This becomes unsettling when you realize how personal meaning depends on artificial boundaries. You assign importance to moments because they are rare, irreversible, or final. But if nothing truly ends, then loss is not disappearance, only rearrangement beyond recognition. The comfort of closure may be an illusion created to make change tolerable. Reality does not conclude chapters. It flows through forms, shedding them without pause, while your mind draws lines in the current and calls them beginnings and endings so it can pretend it knows where things stop. Happiness may be a side effect. Happiness may be a side effect, not a destination, which means the more directly you chase it, the more elusive it becomes. This idea suggests that happiness was never meant to be sustained or pursued on its own, but to emerge briefly as a consequence of other processes, connection, movement, meaning, or survival, before fading again. Your brain is not designed to keep you happy. It is designed to keep you functioning. Pleasure appears as a signal, not a reward meant to last. When something improves your chances of survival or belonging, happiness flickers on to reinforce the behavior, then quietly shuts off once its job is done. Expecting it to stay is like expecting a notification sound to keep playing forever. This explains why happiness feels fragile. The moment you become aware of it, you begin to lose it. When you monitor it, measure it, or demand it, it collapses under attention. It works best when it arrives indirectly, unnoticed, while you are focused on something else entirely. If happiness is a side effect, then permanent happiness is not only unrealistic, but unnatural. Constant pleasure would erase contrast, dull motivation, and flatten experience. The absence of happiness is not failure. It is the default state of a system built for fluctuation. This idea is unsettling because it reframes fulfillment. You are not meant to feel good all the time. You are meant to move, adapt, care, struggle, and occasionally, almost accidentally, feel happy as a byproduct of being engaged with something that matters to you. Determinism may still allow meaning. Determinism may still allow meaning, even if every event in your life was inevitable long before you were aware of it. This idea suggests that meaning does not depend on freedom from causation, but on experience unfolding from the inside. A path can be fixed and still feel deeply personal while you walk it. If every thought, decision, and action arises from prior causes, the feeling of choice does not disappear. You still hesitate, hope, fear, and commit. These experiences are not invalidated by being determined. They are real because they are felt, not because they are uncaused. A story does not lose its impact because the ending is already written. What makes this unsettling is how little changes outwardly. Love still hurts, effort still exhausts, regret still lingers. Meaning does not evaporate when freedom is questioned. It persists because it emerges from involvement, not authorship. You do not need to control the universe to care about what happens in it. In a deterministic reality, meaning is not something you choose to create from nothing. It is something that arises as events pass through awareness. You are not outside the chain of causes, observing it. You are part of it, shaped by it, and responding from within it. Even if nothing could have gone differently, it still matters that this is what happened to you, because experience does not require alternatives to feel real. Existence may need no reason. Existence may need no reason at all, no cause that justifies it, no purpose that explains why there is something instead of nothing. This idea suggests that reality does not sit on top of a hidden answer waiting to be uncovered. It may simply be the case that existence is without explanation, intention, or necessity. The mind resists this because it is built to search for causes. Every event you understand is linked to something before it, so you instinctively assume the universe itself must follow the same rule. But the demand for a reason may be a human habit, not a cosmic requirement. Reality may not owe you an explanation. If existence needs no reason, then asking why at the deepest level becomes meaningless, not unanswered, but misapplied. There may be no deeper layer beneath reality, no foundation holding it up. The universe could be brute fact, existing without justification the way a number exists without motivation. This idea is unsettling because it removes the comfort of purpose. There is no hidden plan validating suffering, no final rationale that redeems chaos. Meaning does not descend from above. It must be constructed locally or not at all. Yet there is something strangely freeing in this. If existence requires no reason, then it is not failing to make sense. It is not broken. It is not incomplete. It simply exists. And your demand for explanation may say more about your fear of groundlessness than about the nature of reality itself. Consciousness could be fundamental. Consciousness could be fundamental, not a byproduct of matter, but the ground from which matter arises. This idea suggests that awareness is not something the universe accidentally produces in rare corners, but something woven into reality itself, present in some form everywhere. Instead of consciousness emerging from complexity, complexity may emerge within consciousness. If this is true, then the world is not made of lifeless stuff that somehow wakes up. It is made of experience first, structure second. Atoms, forces, and space may be patterns inside a deeper field of awareness. Much like thoughts are patterns inside your mind, the universe would not be unconscious until brains appear. it would be conscious in ways you do not recognize. This reframes your own awareness as less isolated than it feels. Your consciousness would not be a fragile flame burning against an indifferent universe, but a localized expression of something vast. Individual minds would be like waves on an ocean, distinct in shape yet inseparable from the water beneath them. The unsettling part is how this dissolves familiar boundaries. If consciousness is fundamental, then separation may be superficial. The distinction between self and world becomes blurry, even artificial. Harm to others begins to feel less external, meaning stops being something you project onto a dead universe and becomes something already present, though hidden. You are not a machine that learned to feel. You are a feeling that learned to appear as a machine, temporarily convinced it is separate from the awareness it never left. Memory may be mostly fiction. Memory may be mostly fiction, not because it is useless, but because it was never meant to be accurate. This idea suggests that your memories are not stored recordings of the past, but reconstructed stories your mind rebuilds each time you recall them. What feels like retrieval is actually creation, happening again and again. When you remember something, your brain does not open a file and replay it. It assembles fragments, emotions, images, assumptions, and expectations into a narrative that feels continuous. Each retelling subtly rewrites the event. Details shift, emotions intensify or fade. Over time, the memory drifts further from what actually happened, while becoming more convincing to you. This is unsettling because memory forms the backbone of identity. You believe you are who you are because of what you remember. If those memories are largely fictionalized, then the self you trust may be built on stories that were never true in the way you assume. Your past becomes less like a foundation and more like a constantly edited draft. The confidence you feel about certain memories is not evidence of accuracy, but of repetition. The more often you recall something, the more stable it feels, even as it moves further from reality. Certainty grows while truth erodes. If memory is mostly fiction, then your relationship with the past is not about knowing what happened. It is about maintaining coherence. You remember not to preserve truth, but to preserve a sense of continuity that allows you to keep moving forward. Choice may feel real without being real. Choice may feel real without being real, meaning the sensation of deciding could exist even if no genuine alternatives ever did. This idea suggests that what you experience as choice is not a moment of freedom, but a psychological process unfolding exactly as it must, giving awareness the impression of control. When you decide, you feel tension, uncertainty, and anticipation. Options appear in your mind, weighed and evaluated, until one action emerges. But this process may be no different from any other event in nature, governed by prior causes you cannot see. The feeling of choice does not prove freedom any more than the feeling of motion proves the sun revolves around you. What makes this unsettling is how convincing the illusion is. Your entire sense of responsibility, pride, and regret is built on the belief that you could have done otherwise. Yet even if you couldn't, those emotions still arise. They are generated automatically, not because freedom exists, but because the system requires them to function. The experience of choosing may be a narrative added after the fact, explaining an outcome that was already determined. Awareness receives the result and retroactively labels it a decision. If choice is not real, the feeling of it still shapes your life completely. You live as if you are choosing, because the illusion is indistinguishable from reality from the inside. And that may be all that experience ever needed. Reality may exceed comprehension. Reality may exceed comprehension, not because you have failed to understand it, but because it was never meant to fit inside a human mind. This idea suggests that the deepest structure of existence could be fundamentally inaccessible, not temporarily unknown, but permanently beyond the limits of thought, language, and intuition. Your brain evolved to survive, not to perceive truth in its entirety. It filters, simplifies, and compresses reality into manageable models that allow you to function. What you experience as the world may be a drastic reduction, a user interface that hides most of what is actually there. The fact that things feel understandable does not mean they are. This becomes unsettling when you realize that comprehension itself may be the illusion. You feel as though you grasp reality because your models are internally consistent, not because they correspond to what truly exists. The universe may operate according to principles that cannot be imagined, only approximated through symbols that break down at the edges. When confronted with this, confusion is not a failure, but a signal. It marks the boundary where human cognition stops working. Beyond that boundary, reality does not become clearer with more thinking. It becomes stranger, quieter, and resistant to explanation. If reality exceeds comprehension, then certainty is a psychological comfort, not an achievement. You may spend your entire life refining models that work well enough while never touching the thing they point to. Understanding may not bring you closer to truth, only closer to the limits of what a mind like yours can endure without collapsing. You may live the most probable life. You may live the most probable life, not the best one, not the most meaningful one, but the one that was statistically most likely to happen. This idea suggests that who you are, where you were born, and the choices you believe you made could be the result of probability, quietly narrowing possibilities until only one path remained. From the outside, your life feels full of decisions, accidents, and turning points. From a broader view, it may look like a convergence. Given your genetics, environment, culture, and timing, this version of your life may have been overwhelmingly likely compared to all others. The rare outcomes feel dramatic, but the ordinary ones dominate reality. This is unsettling because it reframes identity. Your talents, fears, beliefs, and even your regrets may not be personal achievements or failures, but expected outcomes. You did not become who you are through sheer will. You became who you are because the conditions made it easy. Freedom does not vanish in this view, but it becomes constrained. You feel choice because you cannot see the probabilities guiding you. You experience effort because the system still requires it. But behind the scenes, most alternatives were never really competitive. The strange comfort is that you are not uniquely unlucky or uniquely flawed. You are typical in a universe that favors typicality. Your life may not be special in the way you were taught to expect, but it is deeply representative, a single realization of what was most likely to exist at all. Time may be psychological. Time may be psychological, not a physical river you are carried along, but an experience generated by the mind to organize change. This idea suggests that time does not exist as an independent structure flowing through the universe, but as a mental framework that allows consciousness to sequence events, compare states, and maintain a sense of continuity. Your experience of time stretches and compresses depending on attention and emotion. Minutes can feel endless during fear, while years collapse into a blur when remembered. This instability hints that time, as you feel it, is not a stable feature of reality, but a product of perception. The clock measures something external, but the passage you live inside is constructed internally. Without memory, time dissolves. Without anticipation, the future vanishes. The sense of moving from past to present to future relies entirely on mental processes stitching moments together. When those processes falter, as in trauma, deep focus, or altered states, time loses its familiar shape and begins to fragment. If time is psychological, then the pressure you feel from it is not imposed by the universe, but generated within you. Deadlines, urgency, and the fear of running out are emotional experiences, not cosmic ones. Reality may not be rushing anywhere at all. This idea is unsettling because it suggests that you are not trapped in time, you are producing it. And the way time feels in your life may say more about the state of your mind than about the structure of the universe itself. Experience may be infinite. Experience may be infinite, even if bodies decay, memories collapse, and individual lives clearly end. This idea suggests that while particular forms of consciousness are temporary, experience itself may have no final boundary. It may continue changing shape without ever stopping altogether. From the inside, experience has never been absent. You remember gaps, sleep, unconsciousness, anesthesia, but you never experience non-experience. There is no memory of nothingness, only a return to awareness. Each time consciousness resumes, it feels continuous, as if experience simply skipped ahead without ever truly ending. This becomes unsettling when you consider death. If experience is infinite, then the end of one identity does not guarantee the end of awareness. The structure that makes you you may dissolve, but experience itself could persist, attaching to new forms or states you cannot imagine. Not reincarnation in any familiar sense, but continuation without memory, without narrative. Infinity here does not mean endless pleasure or punishment. It means the absence of a final stop. Experience may not need a subject to persist, just as sound does not need meaning to exist. Awareness could arise wherever conditions allow it, again and again, without ever remembering previous instances. If experience is infinite, then non-existence may be impossible to experience, even if it is conceptually imaginable. Consciousness may not be something that ends, but something that keeps happening, while identities appear and vanish like temporary shapes on an endless surface of awareness. Rationality may not track truth. Rationality may not track truth, even though it feels like the most reliable tool you have. This idea suggests that reasoning did not evolve to reveal reality as it is, but to help you survive, coordinate with others, and make decisions quickly enough to stay alive. What feels logical may be useful, not accurate. Your mind rewards coherence, not correspondence. A rational explanation feels true because it fits cleanly with what you already believe. But internal consistency does not guarantee alignment with the world. Entire belief systems can be rational, elegant, and wrong at the same time, functioning perfectly within themselves while missing reality entirely. This becomes disturbing when you realize how easily rationality can defend falsehoods. With enough assumptions in place, almost anything can be justified. Logic does not ask whether its premises reflect reality. It only checks whether conclusions follow from them. If the starting point is flawed, rational thinking simply leads you deeper into error. Rationality also favors simplicity and stability. The mind prefers explanations that reduce uncertainty and preserve identity. Truth, however, may be messy, contradictory, and psychologically threatening. When that happens, reason often becomes a shield rather than a guide. If rationality does not track truth, then feeling reasonable offers no guarantee of being right. You may be calmly, intelligently, and confidently misunderstanding the world. What unsettles most is not the possibility of error, but the realization that your best thinking tools may be designed to protect you from reality, not reveal it. You may never access reality itself. You may never access reality itself, no matter how intelligent, careful, or curious you become. This idea suggests that what you experience is always a step removed from whatever truly exists, filtered through perception, interpretation, and mental models that stand between you and the world. Reality is not encountered directly, it is translated. Every sight, sound, and sensation is processed, simplified, and reconstructed by the brain before it reaches awareness. You do not hear vibrations or see electromagnetic waves. You experience representations your nervous system creates so you can function. Even your most precise instruments extend this process rather than escape it, converting signals into forms your mind can understand. This means knowledge is never contact, only approximation. You build theories, maps, and explanations, but none of them are the territory. They work well enough to predict and control. which creates the illusion of access, but usefulness is not the same as truth. Reality may remain fundamentally hidden behind the tools you use to approach it. The unsettling part is that there may be no way around this barrier. You cannot step outside perception to check it against something purer. Every attempt to reach reality uses the same system that distorts it. Even doubt is filtered through the same machinery. You live inside an interface, not the system itself. What lies behind it may be radically different from anything you can imagine, forever inaccessible, while you navigate a convincing surface that feels like reality only because it is all you have ever known, meaning may be irrelevant to living, even though the search for it feels unavoidable. This idea suggests that life does not require an overarching purpose to be lived fully, or even to continue at all. Organisms existed, moved, adapted, and survived long before the concept of meaning ever appeared. Living came first, meaning came later. You breathe, react, desire, and suffer without consulting a philosophy. Your body does not ask why it should keep going. It simply does. Hunger, fear, attachment, and curiosity drive action more reliably than any abstract sense of purpose. Life functions perfectly well without explanation. The pressure to find meaning may be a uniquely human burden, not a necessity of existence. When meaning feels absent, life does not stop. Only the story you tell about life begins to fracture. This creates the illusion that something essential is missing, when in reality only an interpretation has collapsed. If meaning is irrelevant to living, then its absence is not a failure state. It is a return to raw experience. Pain still hurts. Beauty still moves you. Love still binds. None of these require justification to be real or powerful. This idea is disturbing because it removes the promise that understanding will save you. You may never find a reason that makes everything make sense, and yet life continues anyway, indifferent to explanation, unfolding through action, sensation, and survival without waiting for meaning to arrive. Pain may carry unique information. Pain may carry unique information that no other experience can deliver. This idea suggests that pain is not merely a malfunction to be eliminated, but a form of perception that reveals aspects of reality hidden from comfort and ease. It is a signal that cuts through distraction and forces awareness into the present moment. Unlike pleasure, which can fade into the background, pain demands interpretation. It tells you something is wrong, threatened, or out of alignment. Physical pain exposes the limits of the body. Emotional pain exposes attachments, expectations, and vulnerabilities you might otherwise deny. It highlights what matters by showing where you can be hurt. This becomes unsettling when you notice how much self-knowledge arrives through suffering. Loss clarifies value. Failure exposes illusion. Fear reveals priorities. Pain compresses experience into something raw and undeniable, stripping away narratives you rely on to stay comfortable. In those moments, reality feels closer, less filtered. Pain also resists abstraction. You can explain it, analyze it, or moralize it, but when it is felt, it overrides theory. It is immediate and personal, refusing to be fully shared or transferred. This makes it isolating yet deeply informative. If pain carries unique information, then a life engineered to remove all suffering might also remove certain truths, not because pain is good, but because it reveals boundaries, dependencies, and fragilities that nothing else is strong enough to expose. Stability may matter more than truth. Stability may matter more than truth, not because truth is unimportant, but because systems that cannot maintain coherence tend to collapse. This idea suggests that beliefs, institutions, and even minds prioritize remaining functional over being accurate. What keeps things together is often valued more than what is correct. Human psychology is built around balance, a belief that destabilizes identity, relationships, or social order is often rejected regardless of its truth. This is why uncomfortable facts are ignored, softened, or reframed. Truth that threatens stability feels dangerous, while falsehoods that preserve order feel necessary. This pattern extends beyond individuals. Societies rely on shared narratives to function. These narratives do not survive because they are true, but because they coordinate behavior, reduce uncertainty, and prevent chaos. A stable illusion can be more useful than a disruptive reality. What makes this unsettling is realizing how often truth is sacrificed quietly, not through censorship or force, but through preference. People choose what allows them to continue living as they are. Stability becomes the invisible standard by which beliefs are judged. If stability matters more than truth, then reality as you experience it may be shaped less by what is real and more by what is tolerable. You may live inside structures designed to keep you functioning, not informed. The most protected ideas are not always the truest ones, but the ones whose removal would cause everything else to fall apart. Your memories may be false. Your memories may be false, even the ones that feel vivid, emotional, and central to who you are. This idea suggests that memory is not a recording of the past, but a reconstruction, rebuilt each time you recall it. What you remember is not what happened, but what your mind currently believes happened. Every act of remembering slightly alters the memory itself. Details are filled in, emotions are reshaped, and gaps are smoothed over so the story feels coherent. Over time, the original event fades while the retold version hardens, gaining confidence rather than accuracy. You trust it because it feels familiar, not because it is true. This becomes unsettling when you realize how much identity depends on memory. Your sense of self is built from stories about where you came from, what you endured, and how you were treated. If those stories shift, so does the person you believe yourself to be. You defend memories not because they are correct, but because they stabilize who you think you are. Even strong emotion does not protect memory from distortion. In fact, emotion often makes memories less reliable, not more. Fear, love, and shame reshape events to fit meaning rather than fact. The brain prioritizes narrative over precision. If your memories are false, the past is not fixed behind you. It is alive, constantly rewritten in the present. You are not carrying history with you. You are carrying interpretations, quietly adjusting them to make your life feel continuous and yourself feel real. Consciousness may persist without memory. Consciousness may persist without memory, meaning awareness itself could continue even when everything that once defined you disappears. This idea suggests that memory is not the source of consciousness, but an accessory to it, something that gives continuity and identity, not existence. When memory fades, awareness may remain. You already glimpse this in moments where memory loosens its grip. In deep focus, intense emotion, or sudden shock, there are stretches of experience where the sense of self thins out. You are still aware, still present, but not narrating, not recalling, not anchoring the moment to a personal story. Awareness exists without reference. If memory were erased completely, consciousness might not vanish. It would simply lose its history. Experience would continue, but without a past to compare against or a future to anticipate. There would be sensation without context, perception without identity, awareness without a name attached to it. This idea becomes unsettling when you consider death or severe memory loss. What disappears may not be consciousness, but the structure that makes it feel like you. The fear of non-existence may actually be the fear of losing memory, not of losing awareness itself. If consciousness can persist without memory, then identity is not fundamental. The sense of being someone may be temporary, while awareness continues in a stripped-down form, experiencing without remembering, present without a story, existing without ever knowing what it once was. Only the present may exist, only the present may exist, while the past and future survive only as mental constructions. This idea suggests that reality is not stretched across time, but confined to a single, continuously renewing moment. Everything else is memory or anticipation, experienced now but not existing anywhere else. The past feels solid because it is rehearsed constantly. Memories replay, stories repeat, and records persist, giving the impression of something that still exists. But these are traces, not the past itself. The future feels real because the mind projects forward, simulating possibilities and expectations. Yet none of that has happened. Both are experienced only as thoughts occurring in the present. This becomes unsettling when you realize how thin reality might be. If only the present exists, then everything you love, regret, or fear exists only as long as it is being remembered or imagined. The moment attention shifts, it dissolves. Existence is not a long line, but a narrow point, endlessly refreshing. The sense of continuity may come from memory stitching moments together so seamlessly that the gaps disappear. But each moment may be born alone, with no direct connection to the last beyond what is remembered. If only the present exists, then control over life shrinks dramatically. You cannot fix the past or reach the future. You can only respond to what is happening now, in a reality that may be constantly appearing and vanishing faster than you can hold on to it. Knowledge may deepen. Uncertainty. Knowledge may deepen uncertainty rather than dissolve it, even though it promises clarity. This idea suggests that learning does not steadily replace confusion with understanding, but often exposes how fragile your certainty was to begin with. Each answer opens new questions, expanding the unknown faster than it can be contained. Early understanding feels solid because it is simple. As knowledge grows, simplicity breaks. Details multiply, contradictions emerge, and boundaries blur. What once felt obvious becomes conditional. What once seemed true becomes context-dependent. The world does not sharpen, it becomes more complex. This is unsettling because certainty feels like safety. Not knowing where you stand creates anxiety, and knowledge threatens that comfort by revealing how much remains unresolved. The more you understand a system, the more variables you discover influencing it. Control fades as awareness grows. Knowledge also exposes the limits of explanation. You begin to see that many beliefs rest on assumptions, models, and approximations rather than solid foundations. What you know works, but you no longer believe it is final. Understanding becomes provisional, always subject to revision. If knowledge deepens uncertainty, then wisdom is not confidence, but tolerance for not knowing. The unsettling part is realizing that ignorance felt peaceful not because it was true, but because it hid complexity. As knowledge accumulates, certainty erodes, leaving you more aware, more informed, and less sure than ever before. Reality may correct itself. Reality may correct itself even when no one is consciously guiding it. This idea suggests that the world is not a perfectly consistent system, but a self-adjusting one, constantly compensating for instability, contradiction, and excess. What looks like chaos or collapse may be reality restoring balance in ways that feel destructive from the inside. When systems drift too far in one direction, pressure builds, economies crash, ecosystems reset, empires fall, beliefs unravel. These events feel like failures, but they may function more like corrections, releasing tension that could not be sustained indefinitely. Reality does not preserve what feels meaningful. It preserves what can continue. This becomes unsettling when you realize that individual suffering may be irrelevant to the correction process. Lives are disrupted not because something went wrong, but because something had to change. Stability is not maintained by intention or morality, but by feedback loops that operate without awareness or care. On a smaller scale, this correction may happen within you. Psychological breakdowns, identity crises, and moments of collapse often arrive after prolonged imbalance. They feel like malfunctions, yet they sometimes strip away structures that were no longer viable. What survives feels truer only because what was unsustainable has been removed. If reality corrects itself, then permanence is an illusion. No structure, belief, or system is safe from adjustment. What feels solid may only be temporarily tolerated. Reality does not promise continuity. It only ensures that whatever exists cannot drift too far from what the system can bear before it quietly or violently pulls itself back. The self may be learned. The self may be learned, not discovered, meaning who you think you are could be something you were taught to become rather than something that naturally emerged from within. This idea suggests that identity is not a fixed core waiting to be uncovered, but a pattern shaped through repetition, feedback, and expectation from the world around you. From early childhood, you are mirrored by others. You are told your name, your traits, what you are good at, what you lack, what is acceptable, and what is not. Over time, these reflections harden into an internal narrative. You begin to recognize yourself the way others recognize you, adopting labels and behaviors that feel natural only because they are familiar. The feeling of having a stable self may come from habit rather than essence. You respond in predictable ways because you have learned that this is who you are. When those patterns are disrupted through trauma, isolation, or sudden change, the self can feel strangely absent or fluid, as if it were never as solid as it seemed. If the self is learned, it can be unlearned. This is both liberating and unsettling. The identity you protect may not be necessary for consciousness to function. It may simply be a model you carry to navigate social reality. This idea is disturbing because it implies that beneath the personality, roles, and stories, there may be no permanent self at all, only awareness adapting, again and again, to whatever environment teaches it how to be. Perception favors usefulness over accuracy. Perception favors usefulness over accuracy, meaning what you see is not what is true, but what is helpful. This idea suggests that the mind did not evolve to reveal reality as it is, but to keep you alive long enough to act within it. Accuracy is optional, survival is not. Your senses simplify, exaggerate, and ignore information constantly. Objects feel solid, even though they are mostly empty space. Colors exist as categories, even though light is continuous. Faces stand out instantly, while backgrounds blur, because recognizing other humans matters more than understanding the environment precisely. You do not see the world. You see a version optimized for action. This becomes unsettling when you realize how much trust you place in perception. You assume what appears obvious must be real when it may simply be efficient. Entire aspects of reality could be missing or distorted because they offer no advantage. The mind edits the world without asking, presenting a finished product you mistake for truth. Perception also hides its own limits. It feels complete because it removes what would overwhelm you. The illusion works precisely because you are unaware of what was discarded. If perception favors usefulness over accuracy, then expanding understanding requires questioning what feels obvious. Reality may be far stranger than it appears, not because it is hidden, but because your mind was never designed to show it to you in the first place. You may observe yourself. You may observe yourself in the same way you observe the world, as if part of you stands back and watches your thoughts, emotions, and actions unfold. This idea suggests that the mind is not a single, unified agent, but a layered system where awareness can turn inward and treat the self as an object rather than a subject. When you notice a thought arise, you are not identical to that thought. When you feel an emotion and recognize it as anger or fear, something in you is watching it happen. That watcher feels quiet, detached, and strangely untouched. It does not argue or explain, it simply notices. This creates the unsettling sense that you are both the actor and the audience. This ability fractures the idea of a solid self. If you can observe your thoughts, then they are not you. If you can watch your personality shift with mood, stress, or context, then identity begins to look temporary. The self becomes a process playing out under observation, not a fixed point directing events. What makes this disturbing is how easily the observer can distance itself. Pain, desire, and fear lose some of their grip when seen rather than inhabited. This suggests that suffering depends not only on experience, but on identification. If you can observe yourself, then the boundary between who you are and what happens to you becomes unstable. You are no longer fully inside your life. You are watching it occur, moment by moment, with no clear line separating the observer from the observed. Real may not mean what you think. Real may not mean what you think, even though it feels like the most solid word you know. This idea suggests that what you call real is not an absolute category, but a practical one, a label applied to whatever resists your expectations strongly enough. Reality may not be defined by what exists, but by what persists when questioned. You tend to treat the real as something independent, stable, and external, but dreams feel real while they last. Emotions feel real without occupying space. Money, borders, and identities feel real despite existing only through collective agreement. What unites these is not their substance, but their effect. They shape behavior, generate fear, and demand attention. This becomes unsettling when you realize that real may simply mean unavoidable. Pain is real because it forces response. Gravity is real because it constrains movement. Beliefs are real because they motivate action. None of these require an underlying essence to function. They only need influence. Your brain may not distinguish between what exists and what matters. If something consistently affects your experience, it is treated as real, regardless of its ontological status. This is why symbols can hurt, stories can heal, and imagined futures can control present behavior. If real is defined by impact rather than truth, then reality becomes layered. Some things are real to the body, others to society, others only to the mind. You may be living among realities that cannot be measured, only felt. What you trust as real may not be the foundation of existence, but the surface your nervous system learned not to fall through, meaning may exist without purpose, suggesting that significance does not require a goal, a plan, or an intended outcome. This idea separates meaning from design. Something can feel deeply meaningful even if it was never meant to happen, never aimed at anything, and never leads anywhere beyond itself. Purpose implies direction. Meaning does not. A sunset has no objective. Music is not trying to arrive somewhere. A moment of connection does not need to justify itself by producing a result. These experiences feel meaningful not because they serve a function, but because they are felt fully while they are happening. If meaning exists without purpose, then the pressure to be going somewhere begins to dissolve. Your life does not need a final destination to matter. Moments do not need to contribute to a larger plan to feel significant. The demand that everything add up may be something the mind imposes, not something reality requires. This idea becomes unsettling when you realize how much suffering comes from confusing purpose with worth. When purpose is lost, meaning is assumed to be lost as well. But meaning may still be present, embedded in experience itself, independent of direction or outcome. Meaning without purpose is fragile and immediate. It cannot be stored, achieved, or guaranteed. It exists only while it is being experienced, and when it fades, nothing is broken. It simply means that experience has shifted, not that life has failed to justify itself. Thoughts may arise automatically. Thoughts may arise automatically, appearing in the mind without being summoned or chosen. This idea suggests that thinking is not something you actively do, but something that happens to you. Words, images, impulses, and memories surface on their own, while awareness simply notices them after they arrive. If you watch closely, you can see this happening. A thought appears, fully formed, without warning. You did not decide its content, timing, or tone. You only became aware of it once it was already there. The sense of control comes later, when the mind claims ownership and calls it your thought. This becomes unsettling when you realize how much of your inner life operates this way. Worries repeat themselves without permission. Memories intrude when least expected. Ideas emerge in moments of rest, not effort. Even the thought, "I am choosing this," may itself be an automatic event. The mind feels like a space where thoughts occur, not a machine that manufactures them on command. Awareness does not author them, it encounters them. This blurs the line between thinker and thought, weakening the idea of a central controller behind the mind. If thoughts arise automatically, then identity becomes less solid. You are not the source of everything that passes through you. You are the place where it appears. And once this is noticed, the boundary between thinking and being begins to feel far thinner than it once did. Death may change perspective. Death may change perspective rather than end experience, not by destroying awareness, but by removing the frame through which awareness once operated. This idea suggests that what dies is not consciousness itself, but the structure that localized it into a single body, a single history, a single point of view. Right now, experience feels anchored. Sensations arrive from one place, thoughts feel personal, time feels linear. All of this may depend on the constraints of a living brain. When those constraints dissolve, awareness may not disappear, but lose its familiar orientation. Experience could continue without direction, without identity, without a center. This is unsettling because it removes the comfort of finality. Death is often imagined as silence or nothingness because those ideas feel manageable. A change in perspective is harder to picture. It implies continuity without recognition, experience without memory, awareness without a story to hold it together. If death alters perspective, then fear itself may be tied to how narrowly you currently experience reality. What feels like annihilation from inside the body could feel like expansion from outside it. The terror comes from imagining death using the same frame that death may dissolve. What disturbs most is not the possibility of nothing, but the possibility of something unfamiliar, a mode of experience so different that it cannot be remembered, anticipated, or communicated, yet real in a way that makes the idea of an ending feel incomplete and misleading. Certainty may be emotional comfort. Certainty may be emotional comfort rather than intellectual achievement. This idea suggests that the need to be sure does not arise from truth-seeking, but from the discomfort of uncertainty. You do not cling to certainty because it is correct, but because it soothes something deeper and more fragile. The mind reacts to ambiguity as a threat. Not knowing creates tension, vulnerability, and loss of control. Certainty closes that gap. It provides a sense of stability, even if the belief itself is flawed. This is why confident explanations feel calming and why doubt feels exhausting. Certainty reduces psychological noise. This becomes unsettling when you realize how easily certainty can attach itself to weak foundations. Strong emotions, repetition, and social reinforcement can produce absolute conviction without evidence. Once certainty forms, it defends itself aggressively, rejecting information that threatens the comfort it provides. The goal quietly shifts from understanding to protection. Beliefs tied to identity become especially resistant. To question them feels like emotional danger, not intellectual curiosity. Certainty then functions like armor, shielding the self from confusion, fear, and instability. It does not need to be true. It only needs to hold. If certainty is comfort, then doubt is not failure, but exposure. Sitting with uncertainty forces you to feel what certainty was masking. The discomfort is not proof you are wrong. It is proof you are no longer anesthetized. You may believe you are defending truth when you are actually defending a feeling. The strongest convictions often reveal not what you know, but what you are afraid to sit without. No experience truly repeats. No experience truly repeats, even when it appears identical on the surface. This idea suggests that repetition is an illusion created by memory, not a property of reality. Every moment you live through is happening for the first and only time, shaped by conditions that can never align in exactly the same way again. When you say something has happened before, what you really mean is that it resembles something stored in memory. But resemblance is not sameness. You are not the same person you were then. Your body has changed. Your expectations have shifted. The context has subtly rearranged itself. Even if the setting looks familiar, the awareness encountering it is different. Memory compresses experience into categories. It smooths out differences and labels moments as repeats to make the world feel stable and navigable. Without this compression, reality would feel overwhelming. But that stability comes at the cost of accuracy. What feels like repetition is actually novelty filtered through familiarity. This becomes unsettling when you realize how often you live on autopilot. You assume you know how something will feel because you believe you felt it before. In doing so, you stop fully perceiving what is actually happening. You trade presence for prediction. If no experience truly repeats, then boredom is not caused by reality, but by expectation. You are not reliving moments. You are refusing to see their differences. Every breath, every conversation, every emotion is occurring once and disappearing forever. Nothing is looping. Nothing is coming back. Experience is continuously collapsing into memory, leaving behind the illusion of repetition while reality moves on without ever retracing its steps. Consciousness may be temporary. Alignment. Consciousness may be temporary alignment, not a permanent possession, but a momentary configuration of conditions coming together just long enough for awareness to appear. This idea suggests that consciousness is not something you have, but something that happens when matter, energy, and information align in a precise way. When those conditions hold, experience arises. Thoughts flow, sensations register, and a sense of self seems to stabilize. When they weaken or break through sleep, injury, anesthesia, or death, consciousness fades without resistance. Nothing leaves, nothing travels. The alignment simply dissolves. This becomes unsettling because it strips consciousness of ownership. Awareness does not belong to you in the way an object does. It is not stored inside you, waiting to be used. It emerges when the system reaches a certain state, much like a pattern appearing in water when conditions are right. If consciousness is alignment, then it is fragile and replaceable. It can arise elsewhere under similar conditions, without carrying your memories or identity with it. The feeling of continuity comes from the alignment holding long enough to feel stable, not from anything enduring beneath it. This idea reframes existence as temporary coherence. You are not a container for consciousness. You are a moment where it happens. And when the alignment breaks, awareness does not necessarily end. It simply no longer takes this particular form. Natural laws may be habits. Natural laws may be habits rather than unbreakable rules, patterns that reality tends to follow because it has followed them before. This idea suggests that the regularity you depend on is not guaranteed by necessity, but by repetition. The universe behaves consistently not because it must, but because it usually does. What you call a law is inferred from observation. Gravity, causality, and motion are trusted because they have not failed often enough to be doubted. But past consistency does not logically require future obedience. The universe may simply be accustomed to behaving a certain way, the way habits form through repetition rather than enforcement. This becomes unsettling when you realize how much certainty rests on expectation. Every prediction you make assumes tomorrow will resemble yesterday. Science itself depends on the assumption that patterns will continue. If natural laws are habits, then reality is stable by tendency, not by guarantee. Habit implies flexibility. Habits can weaken, shift, or break under the right conditions. The universe may allow exceptions so rare or subtle that they feel impossible, not because they cannot happen, but because they almost never do. Order becomes a statistical comfort rather than an absolute truth. If natural laws are habits, then reality is not locked into place. It is leaning, repeating itself out of momentum. The ground beneath existence feels solid only because it has not moved yet, not because it cannot. Introspection may dissolve the self. Introspection may dissolve the self rather than reveal it. This idea suggests that when you look inward deeply enough, you do not find a stable core, but a collection of sensations, thoughts, and impulses appearing and disappearing without a central owner. The more closely you examine what you call me, the less solid it becomes. At a distance, the self feels obvious. You feel like a thinker behind thoughts, a chooser behind choices, an observer behind experience. But when attention turns inward, that sense of ownership starts to fracture. Thoughts arise on their own. Emotions shift without permission. Decisions form before you become aware of them. The self you expected to find is never located. This can feel deeply unsettling because identity depends on continuity. You rely on the belief that there is something persistent moving through time, something that stays the same while everything else changes. Introspection threatens that belief by revealing only movement, not a mover. As the illusion weakens, boundaries soften. The line between observer and experience blurs. You are no longer sure where thoughts end and awareness begins. This can feel like losing control, even though nothing functional has changed. The self may exist only as a useful shortcut, a story that helps coordinate memory, responsibility, and social interaction. When examined too closely, the story stops holding together. What remains after the self dissolves is not emptiness, but experience without ownership. Awareness continues, clear and immediate, but no longer anchored to the idea of someone at its center. Thought may be probabilistic. Not a clean sequence of deliberate steps, but a shifting field of possibilities constantly collapsing into whatever feels most likely in the moment. This idea suggests that you do not select thoughts the way you choose objects from a shelf. Instead, thoughts arise from competing tendencies influenced by mood, memory, biology, and context, with one winning out simply because it had the highest probability at that instant. When a thought appears, it feels intentional. It feels chosen. But you rarely notice the countless other thoughts that almost happened and didn't. Your mind may be generating many potential interpretations, reactions, and ideas at once, with awareness only receiving the final result. Consciousness experiences the outcome, not the competition that produced it. This reframes thinking as something closer to weather than logic. A thought emerges the way a cloud forms, not because it was decided upon, but because conditions allowed it. Change the conditions slightly. Fatigue, fear, hunger, a memory triggered, and an entirely different thought would have appeared instead. If thought is probabilistic, then certainty becomes fragile. Beliefs feel solid only because they keep winning the probability contest, not because they are objectively true. What you think tomorrow may shift without new evidence simply because internal variables changed. This idea is unsettling because it erodes the sense of authorship. You are not fully in control of what you think next. You are witnessing the most likely thought to arise given who you are, where you are, and what state your mind is in, again and again, moment by moment, while mistaking inevitability for choice. Indifference does not forbid care. Indifference does not forbid care, even if the universe remains completely unmoved by what happens within it. This idea suggests that meaning and concern do not require a responsive cosmos. Care does not need to be mirrored by reality to exist or to matter within experience. The universe does not react when you suffer, love, or try. Events unfold the same way regardless of your intentions. Yet within that silence, care emerges naturally. You feel concern before you justify it. Attachment forms without permission. Empathy arises even when it serves no larger purpose. These reactions are not granted by the universe. They originate inside experience itself. This becomes unsettling when you realize that care has no external guarantee. There is no assurance it will be rewarded, remembered, or preserved. Caring exposes you to loss without offering protection in return. Indifference does not oppose care, it simply ignores it. And yet, care persists, not because it is rational in a cosmic sense, but because it is unavoidable. You cannot decide what matters to you by logic alone. The moment something affects you, care has already appeared. If indifference does not forbid care, then caring becomes an act without validation. It exists without permission. It does not need the universe to respond. It only needs awareness to feel it. And that makes care neither heroic nor pointless, but inevitable wherever experience exists. Experience may precede objects. Experience may precede objects, meaning awareness could come before things, not arise from them. This idea suggests that what you call an object is not something you encounter directly, but something constructed after experience has already occurred. Sensation comes first. Interpretation follows. When you look at the world, you do not receive objects, you receive color, shape, movement, pressure, sound. Your mind then organizes these raw impressions into stable things and gives them names. The object feels primary because the process happens instantly, but the experience is what arrives first. The thing is a conclusion. This becomes unsettling when you realize how dependent reality is on perception. Without experience, there may be no objects at all, only undefined potential. A chair is not fundamentally a chair. It is a pattern of sensation interpreted in a familiar way. Change the mode of experience, and the object dissolves into something else. If experience precedes objects, then the world you trust is secondary. Reality as you know it is assembled, not discovered. Objects feel solid because your mind insists on stability, not because stability is inherent. This idea shifts the center of reality inward. Awareness is no longer a byproduct of a material world, but the condition under which a world appears at all. What exists for you may depend less on what is out there and more on the fact that something is experiencing anything in the first place. The brain may predict reality. The brain may predict reality rather than perceive it. This idea suggests that what you experience is not built from the outside in, but from the inside out. Your brain is constantly generating expectations about the world and then checking incoming sensory data to see how wrong those expectations are. Most of the time, it doesn't wait for reality to speak first. What you see is largely a prediction that happens to be accurate enough. Sensory input arrives incomplete, delayed, and noisy. The brain fills in the gaps instantly, constructing a coherent world before you have time to notice the missing information. When prediction matches input, reality feels stable. When it doesn't, you experience surprise, confusion, or illusion. This becomes unsettling when you realize how much of your experience is guesswork. Faces, objects, even your own body are continuously inferred. You are not opening your eyes to see the world. You are checking a model against signals and trusting it when it works. The world feels immediate because the prediction happens faster than awareness. Hallucinations, optical illusions, and false memories are not malfunctions. They are predictions that went uncorrected. The system did what it always does, prioritized efficiency over accuracy. Truth is secondary to speed. If the brain predicts reality, then certainty becomes fragile. You may feel sure of what you see, not because it is correct, but because the model feels complete. Reality is not revealed to you. It is continuously proposed, and you live inside the proposal as if it were the world itself. Perspective may shape truth. Perspective may shape truth, meaning what feels undeniably true to you may not be a universal fact, but a reality formed by where and how you are looking. This idea suggests that truth is not always a single fixed object waiting to be discovered, but something that emerges through viewpoint, context, and limitation. Your mind does not receive the world raw. It filters, prioritizes, and organizes information based on survival, history, and expectation. Two people can witness the same event and come away with incompatible truths, not because one is lying, but because their perspectives carve different meanings out of the same moment. What you call truth may be a stable pattern that works from your position, not a complete description of reality. Shift the angle, the scale, or the frame of reference, and what was once obvious can dissolve or even reverse. Certainty often survives, not because it is correct, but because the perspective producing it remains unchanged. This becomes unsettling when you realize how strongly truth feels emotional. Beliefs are defended not just with logic, but with identity. To challenge a perspective is to threaten the version of reality that makes sense of your experiences. Truth, then, is not only about accuracy, but about coherence. If perspective shapes truth, then disagreement is not always a failure of reasoning. It may be an encounter between realities that are internally consistent but mutually incompatible. The world may contain more than one truth at the same time, each emerging from the position of the observer who holds it. Existence may be stranger than nothing. Existence may be stranger than nothing, even though nothingness feels like the more mysterious idea at first. This suggests that the true puzzle is not why there is something rather than nothing, but how anything at all can be happening right now. Nothingness is simple. Existence is excessive. Nothing requires no explanation. It has no structure, no rules, no instability. Existence, by contrast, is full of conditions, laws, patterns, and experiences that somehow hold together instead of collapsing. The fact that there is a world, awareness, and continuity at all is already wildly improbable. This becomes unsettling when you realize how unnatural existence might be. There is no obvious reason for sensation, for experience, for a universe that does not immediately vanish into silence. That something persists instead of nothing is not intuitive, it is bizarre. Awareness intensifies this strangeness. Not only does existence happen, but it is experienced from the inside. Reality does not merely exist, it feels like something. This added layer makes existence even less explainable. Nothingness would be cleaner, simpler, easier to accept. If existence is stranger than nothing, then familiarity is misleading. You are surrounded by an ongoing impossibility that feels normal only because it never stops. The deepest mystery may not be emptiness, but the fact that anything is happening at all and that you are here to notice it. You may live inside a story. You may live inside a story, not in the metaphorical sense, but as a psychological necessity. This idea suggests that reality, as you experience it, is continuously organized into narrative form, giving events meaning, sequence, and direction even when none may exist inherently. The story does not sit on top of life. It shapes how life is perceived. Your mind links moments together, assigning causes, motives, and lessons. Random events become turning points. Coincidences become signs. Suffering becomes character development. Without this narrative glue, experience would feel fragmented and intolerable. The story keeps reality coherent. What makes this unsettling is how automatically the story forms. You do not choose it consciously. The mind edits memory, highlights certain moments, and erases others to preserve a sense of identity and progress. Facts that disrupt the narrative are reinterpreted or ignored. Truth bends to fit plot. Living inside a story also means living inside expectation. You anticipate arcs, resolutions, and meanings that reality is not obligated to provide. When life refuses to follow the script, distress emerges. The pain is not only in what happens, but in the collapse of the story you believed you were in. If you live inside a story, then identity is a character, not an essence. You are not simply experiencing events. You are constantly narrating them. Reality may be raw and directionless, but the story makes it feel intentional, even when it isn't. Consciousness may be inevitable. Consciousness may be inevitable, not a rare accident, but an outcome that emerges whenever reality becomes sufficiently complex. This idea suggests that awareness is not a miracle confined to humans or animals, but a process that naturally arises when systems reach certain thresholds of organization. Given enough structure, something begins to feel. If this is true, then the universe does not merely allow consciousness, it tends toward it. Wherever information loops, feedback stabilizes, and patterns persist, experience may flicker into existence. Brains would not be special in principle, only in degree. They would be efficient vessels, not unique gateways. This becomes unsettling when you consider how widespread awareness might be. Consciousness may not announce itself with thoughts or language. It may exist in minimal, unfamiliar forms, too simple to recognize, too alien to relate to. Experience could be far more common than you imagine, quietly present in places you assume are inert. Your own awareness would then feel less personal. It would not belong to you in a deep sense, but to the structure temporarily sustaining it. When that structure changes, the experience may not disappear, only relocate or reconfigure. If consciousness is inevitable, then the universe is not indifferent in the way you were taught. It is not asleep until minds appear. It is constantly on the verge of feeling, waiting only for conditions to align. You are not an exception witnessing a silent cosmos. You are one instance of something reality keeps producing whenever it can. Meaning may be compressing, becoming denser and more concentrated as the world accelerates around you. This idea suggests that meaning has not disappeared, but has been forced into smaller and smaller spaces, harder to notice, easier to miss. As information multiplies and stimuli flood awareness, significance no longer spreads out. It collapses inward. You are exposed to more stories, more suffering, more beauty, more opinions than any mind evolved to handle. To cope, consciousness compresses. It skims instead of dwells. It reacts instead of absorbs. Meaning, once stretched across rituals, traditions, and shared narratives, now competes with endless noise. It has less room to breathe. This compression changes how meaning feels. It no longer announces itself clearly. It hides in brief moments, subtle connections, fleeting clarity. Long explanations feel hollow. Grand purposes feel implausible. What remains meaningful must fit into smaller windows of attention, or it is discarded. The unsettling part is that this can feel like emptiness. When meaning compresses, it can resemble loss. You may feel detached, overstimulated, vaguely unsatisfied, as if something essential is missing. But it may not be gone. It may simply be harder to detect, requiring stillness instead of searching. If meaning is compressing, then chasing it at full speed will never work. Expansion overwhelms it. Only slowing down allows it to register. Meaning may now exist in brief clarity rather than lasting certainty, in intensity rather than duration. This idea suggests that the problem is not that life has less meaning, but that meaning has become heavier, quieter, and easier to overlook in a world that never stops moving. You may be an echo. You may be an echo, not an origin. This idea suggests that what you experience as your thoughts, desires, and identity could be reverberations of forces that existed long before you became aware of them. You may not be the source of what moves you, but the place where it briefly resonates. Your beliefs are shaped by language you did not invent. Your emotions follow patterns formed by biology and culture. Even your sense of self may be a reflection of expectations, memories, and reactions bouncing back from the world around you. What feels personal may be inherited momentum. This becomes unsettling when you notice how rarely anything feels truly new. Reactions repeat, habits persist, thought patterns echo themselves across years. You may feel like you are choosing, but often you are responding, replaying, or continuing something already in motion. An echo is real, but it is dependent. It exists because something else sounded first. In the same way, your inner life may be a continuation rather than a beginning. Awareness lights up the movement, but does not necessarily start it. If you are an echo, then identity is not a solid core, but a reverberation shaped by what surrounds you. You still feel, you still experience, but the question shifts from who am I to what am I responding to, and in that shift, the sense of being a separate origin begins to fade. Awareness may be divisible. Awareness may be divisible, not a single indivisible light shining from one center, but something that can fragment, overlap, or exist in parallel. This idea suggests that consciousness is not necessarily one unified field belonging to oneself, but a capacity that can split, merge, or operate in multiple streams at once. You already experience hints of this. Part of you listens while another part plans. You drive without awareness of the road while your mind drifts elsewhere. In moments of shock or danger, awareness can detach, observing calmly while the body reacts. These are not metaphors. They are fractures in the assumption that consciousness is singular. Neurology deepens the disturbance. Brain injuries, dissociative states, and split brain studies reveal minds that operate independently within the same body. One hand acts without the other knowing why. One side perceives what the other denies. Awareness does not collapse into chaos. It simply divides and continues. If awareness is divisible, then unity is not guaranteed. The feeling of being one may be a coordination trick, not a fundamental truth. What you call I may be a temporary agreement between processes that could just as easily drift apart. This idea becomes unsettling when you consider identity. If awareness can split, then who owns experience? Where does responsibility sit? You may not be a single observer, but a shifting collection of viewpoints masquerading as one. Awareness may not belong to you as a whole. It may pass through you in parts, overlapping and separating, leaving the illusion of unity where there is only momentary alignment. Imagination may rival perception. Imagination may rival perception, not as a weaker copy of reality, but as a parallel way of experiencing it. This idea suggests that what you imagine can feel as vivid, convincing, and emotionally powerful as what you see with your eyes. The brain does not sharply separate the two. It uses many of the same systems to generate both. When you imagine a scene, your body can respond as if it were real. Your heart rate changes, muscles tense, emotions surface. Fear triggered by a thought can feel indistinguishable from fear triggered by a threat. The mind reacts to meaning, not to origin. Whether something comes from outside or inside matters less than how believable it feels. This becomes unsettling when you realize how much of your life is shaped by things that never happened. Anticipated futures, remembered pasts, and imagined judgments can dominate behavior more than present reality. You suffer over possibilities, not facts. You act on stories that exist only in your head. Perception itself may rely on imagination. The brain fills in missing details, predicts outcomes, and smooths experience using the same creative machinery. What you call seeing is already partly imagined. If imagination rivals perception, then control over attention becomes power. What you repeatedly imagine trains your nervous system as if it were lived. Inner worlds gain weight. External reality loses its monopoly. You may believe your mind reacts to the world, when much of the time it is reacting to scenes it generated and then treated as real. Time may be partially invisible. Time may be partially invisible, meaning what you perceive as time could be only a thin slice of a much larger structure you are not equipped to sense. This idea suggests that time is not fully accessible to human awareness, much like color is inaccessible to eyes that cannot see certain wavelengths. You experience enough of it to function, but not enough to understand what it really is. You notice time only through change, movement, aging, decay, anticipation. But if something does not change in a way your mind can register, it becomes temporally invisible. Entire layers of time may pass through reality without ever touching perception, operating at scales too slow, too fast, or too complex for consciousness to detect. This makes your experience of time misleadingly simple. You feel it as a straight line moving forward, but that may be a compressed interpretation. Time could branch, overlap, loop, or stack in dimensions you cannot perceive, while your awareness is confined to a narrow channel that presents it as sequential and continuous. The unsettling part is how confident time feels. You trust it completely. You plan around it. You fear running out of it. Yet your certainty may be based on partial data. You may be navigating existence with an incomplete map, mistaking what you can sense for the whole structure. If time is partially invisible, then past and future may not be as distant as they feel. Events could coexist in ways you cannot access. The present may be less a point and more a window, revealing only what your perception allows. This idea quietly destabilizes urgency. What feels like time slipping away may be time moving through layers you cannot see, while you interpret the absence of perception as loss rather than limitation. Interpretation may complete reality. Interpretation may complete reality, meaning the world is not fully formed until it is understood, named, or made sense of. This idea suggests that raw existence alone is incomplete, and that meaning, structure, and coherence emerge only when experience is interpreted by a mind. Events happen, sensations arise, but without interpretation, they remain undefined. A sound is just vibration until it becomes a voice. A pattern is just noise until it becomes a face. Reality may offer data, but interpretation turns it into something that is. What you experience as the world is already layered with explanation. This becomes unsettling when you realize how much of reality depends on this internal process. Different interpretations create different worlds from the same events. The facts may be identical, yet the reality experienced can be entirely different. Suffering, beauty, threat, and hope often arise not from what happens, but from how it is understood. Interpretation also hides itself. Once meaning is assigned, it feels inherent, as if it were always there. You forget that the mind did the work. The world appears solid and self-explanatory, even though it is constantly being completed from the inside. If interpretation completes reality, then truth is not just discovered but constructed in real time. Reality is not only out there waiting to be perceived, it is finished inside awareness, moment by moment, by the stories and meanings imposed upon it. Reality may defy logic. Reality may defy logic, not because it is chaotic or meaningless, but because logic itself may be too small to contain it. This idea suggests that the rules you rely on to make sense of the world are not woven into reality itself, but imposed by the human mind as a coping mechanism. Logic works by excluding contradiction. Something must be either this or that, true or false, existent or non-existent. But reality may not obey such clean divisions. At its deepest level, it may allow contradictions to coexist, states to overlap, and causes to loop into effects. What feels illogical may simply be real in a way the mind cannot comfortably hold. This becomes unsettling when you realize how much trust you place in reasoning. Logic gives you stability. It promises that the world is consistent and predictable. If reality violates logic, then certainty dissolves. Understanding becomes approximation, not capture. You already accept this in small ways. Emotions contradict themselves. Identity changes without explanation. Events feel meaningful and meaningless at once. Logic survives only by simplifying, by trimming away what does not fit. If reality defies logic, then confusion is not a failure but a boundary. The discomfort you feel when something makes no sense may be the sensation of brushing against something real that cannot be flattened into rules. The universe may not be irrational, but it may be structured in a way that makes human logic a convenient fiction rather than a universal law. Thinking may be an action. Thinking may be an action, not a passive process that happens in the background, but something that actively alters reality, especially the reality of your body and behavior. This idea suggests that thoughts are not harmless internal events. They are movements that push systems, shift states, and trigger consequences. When you think, your nervous system responds. Hormones change, muscles prepare, attention narrows. A single thought can increase heart rate, flood the body with stress, or create calm. The body does not wait to see if a thought becomes real. It reacts immediately, as if the thought itself were already an event. This becomes unsettling when you realize how often you act without moving. Replaying an argument, imagining failure, or anticipating danger can exhaust you as much as physical effort. Your mind burns energy, rehearses responses, and strengthens patterns. You are not idle while thinking, you are training. Thinking also shapes future behavior. Each repeated thought reinforces neural pathways, making certain reactions easier and others harder. Over time, patterns solidify. Habits form internally before they ever appear externally. By the time you decide to act, much of the action has already been prepared. If thinking is an action, then attention becomes responsibility. You are not merely observing your thoughts, you are participating in them. What you repeatedly think is not neutral. It is something you are doing to yourself. You may believe action begins when you move, but much of your life is already being shaped in silence. The self may be an event. The self may be an event, not a thing you possess, but something that happens. This idea suggests that the sense of I is not a stable object sitting inside you, but a recurring process that arises when certain conditions align: memory, attention, emotion, and narrative briefly converging into the feeling of being someone. You do not experience the self continuously. There are gaps, moments of absorption, shock, exhaustion, or deep focus where the sense of me fades or disappears entirely. Yet awareness continues. The self returns later, reconstructed, convincing, as if it had been there all along. This hints that identity is something generated, not stored. If the self is an event, then it depends on timing and context. Change the conditions and the event weakens or fails to occur. This explains why the self can feel fragmented, unstable, or unfamiliar at times. It is not breaking. It is simply not being produced in the usual way. This idea becomes unsettling when you realize how much effort goes into maintaining the self. Constant internal narration, comparison, memory reinforcement, and emotional regulation keep the event repeating. When that effort drops, the self loosens its grip. If the self is an event, then you are not something fixed moving through time. You are something that keeps happening. Identity is not carried forward. It is recreated again and again, moment by moment, convincing you of continuity while actually existing only in flashes of coherence. The future may influence you. The future may influence you, even though it has not happened yet. This idea suggests that your actions are not shaped only by the past, but by expectations, fears, hopes, and imagined outcomes pulling you forward. What you believe will happen can exert real pressure on what you do now. You constantly act in response to events that do not exist yet. You prepare, avoid, sacrifice, and commit based on possibilities living only in your mind. These imagined futures shape your present behavior as strongly as memories shape your reactions. In this sense, the future is already active within you. This becomes unsettling when you realize how powerful anticipation is. Anxiety is suffering caused by futures that may never arrive. Motivation is effort spent for outcomes that are uncertain. Regret can even be felt in advance, as if the mind is already mourning what has not occurred. The future, though unreal in a physical sense, becomes psychologically real the moment it is imagined. It reorganizes priorities, changes perception, and alters identity. You are constantly adjusting yourself in response to a version of reality that does not yet exist. If the future influences you, then causation does not move in a single direction within experience. You are shaped not only by what has been, but by what might be, and the present becomes a tension point, stretched between memory behind you and possibility pulling you forward. Explanations may soothe more than reveal. Explanations may soothe more than reveal, offering emotional relief rather than genuine insight. This idea suggests that the primary function of explanation is not always to uncover truth, but to reduce anxiety, restore control, and make uncertainty feel manageable. When something frightening or confusing happens, the mind rushes to explain it. Any explanation, even a weak one, feels better than none. Cause replaces chaos. Narrative replaces silence. The relief arrives immediately, long before accuracy is verified. Understanding feels like safety, whether or not it is earned. This becomes unsettling when you notice how easily explanations stop inquiry. Once a story feels complete, curiosity shuts down. The explanation becomes a resting place, not a bridge. It protects identity by preventing further disturbance. Questions that threaten the story are dismissed as unnecessary or dangerous. Explanations also reflect emotional needs. People accept different accounts of the same event depending on which version preserves meaning, dignity, or hope. Truth that destabilizes can be rejected in favor of explanations that heal. What feels right often wins over what might be real. If explanations soothe more than reveal, then feeling satisfied is not evidence of understanding. You may be calmed by stories that smooth over complexity rather than expose it. The danger is not ignorance, but comfort. The mind may prefer a gentle allusion to an honest unknown, mistaking relief for knowledge. Consciousness may not be owned. Consciousness may not be owned, even though it feels like the most personal thing you have. This idea suggests that awareness does not belong to you in the way objects or identities do. It is not a possession, not something you carry, but something that happens, temporarily, impersonally, without asking permission. You speak of my consciousness as if there were an owner behind it, but when you look closely, ownership never appears. Thoughts arise without being chosen. Emotions surface without being summoned. Sensations come and go on their own schedule. Awareness witnesses all of this, yet it never identifies itself as a thing that can be held. This becomes unsettling because so much of identity depends on possession. You feel secure believing there is something at the center that belongs to you, something stable that cannot be taken. But consciousness may be more like weather than property, a pattern that forms under certain conditions and dissolves when those conditions change. If consciousness is not owned, then it cannot be fully controlled. You do not decide when a thought appears or when awareness fades into sleep. You participate in experience, but you do not command it. The sense of ownership may itself be another experience arising within consciousness, not proof of control. This reframes life as less personal and more temporary. Awareness flows through you, not from you. You are not the source. You are a moment where consciousness happens to be looking. What you fear losing may never have belonged to you at all. Interpretation may be infinite. Interpretation may be infinite, meaning no experience, event, or fact ever collapses into a single final meaning. This idea suggests that reality does not come with built-in explanations, but opens itself differently, depending on the lens applied to it. Every interpretation reveals something while leaving countless other meanings untouched. When something happens, your mind rushes to explain it. This explanation feels definitive, as if the event has been resolved. But that resolution is temporary. Shift your emotional state, your knowledge, or your position in time, and the same event opens into a new interpretation. What once felt clear becomes ambiguous. What once felt meaningless can later feel profound. This reveals how limited any single understanding is. An interpretation is not the truth of an event, but a way of holding it. Reality does not resist reinterpretation because it is not exhausted by explanation. Each meaning sits alongside others, not replacing them, but coexisting in a widening field of possible understandings. The unsettling part is that certainty becomes unstable. If interpretation is infinite, then closure is an illusion. No explanation is final. No conclusion seals experience shut. What you think you have understood may simply be the version that fits your current state of mind. This idea is both liberating and disorienting. You are never wrong for seeing meaning where others do not. You are also never finished. Reality remains open, continuously offering more ways to be understood than any single perspective can contain, leaving experience permanently unfinished and endlessly interpretable. Error may be misunderstood. Error may be misunderstood not as failure or malfunction, but as an essential feature of how understanding develops. This idea suggests that being wrong is not simply a deviation from truth, but a necessary stage in approaching it. Error may be how the mind explores reality rather than avoids it. Much of what you know now exists because something else was once believed and later discarded. Perception adjusts by making mistakes. Beliefs evolve by breaking. Even learning itself depends on error, using incorrect models as stepping stones toward better ones. Without error, there would be no movement, only stagnation. This becomes unsettling when you realize how personally error is experienced. Being wrong feels like a threat to identity, not just to knowledge. The mind resists it because admitting error destabilizes the story of who you are and how you understand the world. Error also hides its value. When corrected, it disappears from view, making it seem pointless in hindsight. But it was necessary for the correction to occur at all. Understanding grows by shedding its earlier forms. If error is misunderstood, then certainty becomes suspect. Being wrong may not mean you failed to understand reality. It may mean you are in the process of doing so, moving through unstable interpretations on the way to something clearer, even if that clarity is temporary. Awareness may belong to no one. Awareness may belong to no one, existing without an owner, a center, or a claimant. This idea suggests that consciousness is not something you possess, but something that happens, an open field in which thoughts, sensations, and emotions appear without belonging to a separate self. When you search for the one who is aware, nothing concrete appears. You find experiences, but not an experiencer. Thoughts arise on their own. Feelings emerge without permission. Perceptions arrive fully formed. Awareness is present, yet there is no clear boundary where it begins or where you take control of it. The sense of ownership may be an assumption layered on top of experience. Language reinforces it by insisting there must be a me doing the seeing, thinking, and feeling. But when examined closely, awareness does not announce itself as owned. It simply illuminates whatever arises, indifferent to identity. This idea becomes unsettling because it dissolves the feeling of being in charge. If awareness belongs to no one, then there is no inner manager directing life. Experience unfolds without supervision. Control becomes a story told after the fact, not a force guiding events. What makes this deeply disturbing is also what makes it quiet. Without ownership, awareness does not struggle, defend, or cling. Suffering intensifies when experience is claimed as mine. When ownership loosens, experience still happens, but without the added weight of identity. If awareness belongs to no one, then you are not the container of consciousness. You are one of the patterns appearing within it, briefly, without possession, without claim, and without a center holding it all together. Continuity may be a stitched illusion. Continuity may be a stitched illusion, something that feels smooth and uninterrupted only because the mind works tirelessly to hold fragments together. This idea suggests that your sense of being the same person from moment to moment is not a natural fact of reality, but an active construction. Experience may arrive in pieces, and the feeling of flow is something added afterward. Your awareness does not perceive a seamless stream. It encounters flashes, sensations, thoughts, emotions, appearing and disappearing. Memory then connects these fragments, filling gaps and smoothing transitions so nothing feels missing. The result is a convincing narrative of me moving through time, even if that movement never actually occurs. This becomes unsettling when you notice how easily continuity breaks. In deep sleep, anesthesia, dissociation, or intense emotion, the sense of self can vanish entirely. When it returns, it feels as if nothing happened, not because nothing happened, but because memory resumed its stitching. Gaps are ignored, not explained. The illusion is strongest because it is functional. Continuity allows responsibility, planning, and identity to exist. Without it, life would feel chaotic and unmanageable. But usefulness does not guarantee truth. The mind may prioritize coherence over accuracy. If continuity is stitched, then the self is not a single thread, but a patchwork. You are not one unbroken presence traveling forward, but a sequence of moments linked just tightly enough to feel whole. What feels like a stable line may actually be countless instants, quietly sewn together so you never notice the seams. Reality may have incompatible layers. Reality may have incompatible layers, meaning the world can be structured in ways that cannot fully agree with each other, yet still coexist. This idea suggests that reality is not a single, unified system that resolves neatly when examined closely, but a stack of layers that make sense internally while contradicting one another when compared. At one layer, the world feels solid, continuous, and causal. Objects persist, actions lead to consequences, identity feels stable. At another layer, everything dissolves into uncertainty, probability, and abstraction. Events lose clear boundaries. Causes blur, the self fragments. Both layers appear real, but they cannot be reconciled into one coherent picture. You move between these layers without noticing. In daily life, common sense works. At deeper levels of inquiry or experience, common sense breaks down. The mistake is assuming one layer must be more real than the other. They may simply be incompatible perspectives applied to the same underlying existence. This becomes unsettling when you realize that contradictions do not signal error, they may signal depth. Reality may not be obligated to make sense all at once. It may only make sense locally, depending on which layer you are engaging with. If reality has incompatible layers, then confusion is not a failure of understanding, but a natural response to crossing boundaries between them. Some truths cancel others out without eliminating them. You can live in a world where free will feels real and also one where it appears impossible without either layer being false. This idea destabilizes certainty. The urge to unify everything into one explanation may be misplaced. Reality may remain fragmented not because it is broken, but because it was never meant to be viewed from only one level at a time. Inner worlds may be vast. Inner worlds may be vast, extending far beyond what you consciously notice and shaping your reality more than the external world ever could. This idea suggests that inside you exists an immense landscape of thoughts, emotions, memories, and symbols, most of which remain unseen. You live within it constantly, yet rarely recognize its size. A single sensation can open entire regions of this inner space. A sound revives forgotten moments. A thought triggers fear or hope before you can intervene. These reactions are not caused only by what happens around you, but by what already exists within you, layered through years of experience. What makes this unsettling is how little of this inner world is under conscious control. Desires form before decisions. Judgments appear before reasoning. Your sense of a unified self may be the surface effect of countless internal processes moving at once, hidden beneath awareness. Inner worlds also differ radically between people. Two individuals can share the same environment and live in completely different realities internally. Meaning, danger, and beauty do not reside in events alone, but in how inner worlds receive them. If inner worlds are vast, then much of life is spent navigating an unseen terrain. You may believe you are reacting to the world outside, while in truth, you are responding to an internal universe that is deeper, older, and larger than you ever realized. Identity may resist truth. Identity may resist truth because its primary function is not accuracy, but survival. This idea suggests that the sense of who you are is built to remain coherent, not to remain honest. Truth that threatens identity is often felt as danger, not insight, triggering defense rather than reflection. Your identity is a structure made of beliefs, memories, values, and narratives that must align to feel stable. When new information challenges this structure, discomfort arises immediately. The mind responds by dismissing, rationalizing, or reinterpreting the threat. This resistance happens automatically before conscious reasoning has a chance to intervene. What makes this unsettling is how invisible the process is. You do not experience yourself as avoiding truth. You experience yourself as being reasonable. Identity protects itself by convincing you that opposing information is flawed, biased, or irrelevant. The defense feels like logic, not fear. This explains why people can be intelligent yet deeply wrong, open-minded yet selective, curious yet immovable. Truth is not evaluated on its merit alone, but on whether it can be integrated without shattering the self-image holding everything together. If identity resists truth, then self-knowledge is not about learning more facts, but about loosening attachment to who you believe you are. The most threatening truths are not those that contradict your opinions, but those that threaten the story that allows you to recognize yourself at all. Meaning may appear only later. Meaning may appear only later, long after events have passed and emotions have cooled. This idea suggests that experiences are not born meaningful in the moment, but become meaningful through reflection, reinterpretation, and distance. While something is happening, it may feel confusing, painful, or empty. Meaning arrives after the fact, if it arrives at all. In the moment, life is raw sensation and reaction. You act, endure, and respond without understanding the larger shape of what is happening. It is only afterward that the mind begins to connect dots, turning chaos into narrative. Causes are assigned, lessons are extracted, suffering is reframed into growth, the past is edited to make the present tolerable. This becomes unsettling because it suggests meaning is not discovered but constructed. Events do not carry inherent significance. You give them significance later so they fit into a story you can live with. Two people can live through the same experience and extract entirely different meanings. both feeling equally true. Distance softens uncertainty. Time provides perspective, not because it reveals truth, but because it reduces emotional noise. What once felt unbearable becomes explainable. What once felt random becomes necessary. The mind prefers coherence over accuracy. If meaning appears only later, then living is always ahead of understanding. You move through experiences blind, trusting that interpretation will eventually catch up. Meaning is not a guide. It is a retrospective comfort, applied once survival is no longer at risk, and the story needs to make sense. You may never know a mind fully. You may never know a mind fully, not even your own. This idea suggests that consciousness is not a transparent space where everything can be observed and understood, but a layered, partially hidden process that resists complete access. Every mind contains depths that remain unreachable, no matter how much time, closeness, or effort is invested. With other people, the limit is obvious. You see behavior, hear words, and infer inner states, but the actual experience remains sealed. Even the most intimate connection relies on translation. What someone feels must be converted into language or action, and something is always lost in that conversion. You never encounter their awareness directly, only its surface expressions. What is more unsettling is that the same limit applies inward. Thoughts appear without explanation. Emotions arise without clear cause. Decisions form before you are aware of making them. You witness your own mind from the inside, yet much of it remains opaque, operating beyond conscious access. The feeling of self-knowledge may be an illusion created by familiarity. You recognize patterns and call that understanding, but recognition is not comprehension. The machinery producing experience stays mostly hidden, even from the one experiencing it. If you can never fully know a mind, then certainty about motives, intentions, and even identity becomes fragile. Misunderstanding is not an accident, it is the default condition. This idea softens judgment while deepening isolation. You are always reaching toward other minds across an unbridgeable gap, and even when you turn inward, part of what you are remains permanently unknown. The universe may explain itself. The universe may explain itself without requiring an external observer, creator, or final interpreter. This idea suggests that reality does not point beyond itself for meaning or justification. Its existence, structure, and behavior may be their own explanation, complete without reference to anything outside them. We are used to explanations that appeal to something prior or higher. Causes explain effects, rules explain outcomes. But this habit may fail at the largest scale. There may be no deeper layer beneath the universe waiting to be uncovered, no final reason hiding behind existence. The universe may simply be the thing that explains itself by being exactly what it is. This becomes unsettling because it denies the comfort of ultimate answers. If the universe explains itself, there is no final why that resolves curiosity. Questions eventually stop not because they are answered, but because there is nowhere else to point. Explanation collapses inward rather than upward. Within this view, laws of nature are not instructions handed down from elsewhere, but descriptions of how reality behaves. Meaning is not missing. It is just not external. The universe does not justify itself to anyone. If the universe explains itself, then understanding has limits not imposed by ignorance, but by structure. Reality may be complete without being interpretable in human terms, and the deepest explanation may be indistinguishable from the fact that everything is already happening. Thought experiments expose limits. Thought experiments expose limits not by answering questions, but by revealing where thinking itself begins to fail. This idea suggests that the true value of imagining extreme scenarios is not clarity, but the moment when intuition breaks and certainty collapses. At that point, the mind runs into the edges of what it can meaningfully process. When you imagine paradoxes, infinite regress, split identities, or impossible worlds, you are not exploring reality directly. You are stress testing the machinery of thought. The discomfort you feel is not confusion about the scenario, but confusion about your own cognitive boundaries. Something no longer fits, and the mind cannot resolve it without distortion. This becomes unsettling because reasoning feels limitless until it suddenly isn't. Logic loops back on itself. Common sense contradicts itself. Intuition pulls in opposite directions at once. The experiment does not fail. Your expectations of thought do. You realize that understanding has a breaking point. Thought experiments also reveal how much meaning depends on hidden assumptions. Concepts like time, self, causation, and choice feel solid until they are isolated and exaggerated. Then they fracture. What once felt obvious becomes ungraspable, not because it is false, but because it was never as stable as it seemed. If thought experiments expose limits, then thinking is not a window onto reality, but a tool with a range. Beyond that range, reality does not become clearer, it becomes silent. The unsettling insight is not that the universe is strange, but that your mind was never built to fully contain it. The unmeasurable may shape reality. The unmeasurable may shape reality more than anything you can quantify. This idea suggests that what most strongly influences existence may be precisely what escapes measurement, prediction, and formal description. Numbers give the illusion of control, but they may only track the surface while deeper forces operate unseen. Love, fear, belief, expectation, intention, none of these can be weighed or precisely measured, yet they steer decisions, collapse empires, start wars, and reshape lives. Entire systems move because of moods, narratives, and shared assumptions that exist nowhere physically, yet act everywhere. What cannot be measured still exerts pressure. This becomes unsettling because modern understanding privileges what can be counted. If something resists measurement, it is treated as secondary or unreal. But reality may not care about what is convenient to track. The most influential variables may be those that refuse to sit still long enough to be captured. Even at the personal level, your life is guided by forces you cannot observe directly. Motivation fades without explanation. Meaning appears without cause. Intuition pushes before logic catches up. You act on feelings you cannot justify, yet they shape outcomes more decisively than careful plans. The unmeasurable does not announce itself. It works quietly beneath awareness, setting conditions rather than outcomes. By the time effects are visible, the cause has already passed. If the unmeasurable shapes reality, then understanding will always lag behind experience. You may spend your life analyzing what happened while the true forces remain invisible, active only in the space where measurement fails and influence begins. Consciousness may have no location. Consciousness may have no location, meaning it might not be situated anywhere in space the way objects are. This idea suggests that awareness is not inside your head, not behind your eyes, and not stored in any specific place, even though it feels as if it must be. The sense of location may be another construction layered onto experience, not a feature of consciousness itself. When you look for where awareness is happening, you never find a point. You find sensations, thoughts, images, sounds, but never the place they are occurring in. Consciousness does not appear as an object among objects. It has no edges, no coordinates, no measurable position. It is simply present, without distance or direction. The brain is often assumed to be the location of consciousness, but that may confuse correlation with containment. Neural activity changes experience, but that does not prove experience is located there. Turning a dial changes a sound, but the music is not inside the dial. The brain may shape consciousness without housing it. This idea becomes unsettling when you realize how deeply you rely on spatial metaphors. You feel like a self inside a body, looking out at a world. But if consciousness has no location, that inside-outside distinction collapses. Awareness is not in you, and you are not in it. The boundary dissolves. If consciousness is not located anywhere, then it cannot be trapped, moved, or confined in the usual sense. It does not occupy space, yet space appears within it. Experience happens, but not at a point. This reframes existence entirely. You are not a consciousness sitting somewhere in the universe. The universe, as you experience it, may be appearing within consciousness that has no address, no center, and no place to point to and say, "It is here." Curiosity may outlast indifference. Curiosity may outlast indifference, even if the universe remains silent and unmoved by everything that happens within it. This idea suggests that while reality does not ask to be understood, the impulse to understand persists anyway. Curiosity does not arise because the universe invites it, but because awareness cannot help but reach outward. Indifference offers no answers, no reassurance, no response. The universe does not reward questioning or punish ignorance, and yet, curiosity survives in that silence. It pushes the mind to explore, to ask, to imagine, even when nothing promises meaning in return. The need to know appears without justification. This becomes unsettling when you realize curiosity does not depend on hope. People continue to ask questions even when answers bring discomfort, even when understanding strips away comfort. Curiosity survives disappointment. It persists through uncertainty, fear, and the realization that some questions may never be resolved. Curiosity may even be stronger than meaning. When meaning collapses, curiosity often remains. It becomes the last movement of the mind in the face of indifference, refusing stillness even when nothing responds. If curiosity outlasts indifference, then seeking is not a reaction to purpose, but a fundamental expression of awareness. The universe may never answer, but the act of questioning continues, not because it is rewarded, but because awareness itself seems unable to remain satisfied with silence. Letting go may reveal truth. Letting go may reveal truth not by adding insight, but by removing resistance. This idea suggests that truth is often obscured not by lack of information, but by the effort to control, explain, and protect what you already believe. The tighter you hold on to certainty, the less you are able to see. The mind clings to ideas because they provide structure. Beliefs stabilize identity, reduce fear, and make the world feel navigable. Letting go of them feels like losing ground. Anxiety rises because control loosens, yet that discomfort may be the signal that something real is being approached. When you stop insisting on answers, experience changes. Perception becomes quieter, less filtered. You notice contradictions without rushing to resolve them. You allow uncertainty without immediately filling it with explanation. In that openness, patterns emerge that could not be seen while grasping for coherence. This is unsettling because effort feels virtuous. Striving, analyzing, and mastering seem like paths to truth. Letting go feels passive, even dangerous, but some forms of understanding cannot be forced. They appear only when the mind stops interfering. If letting go reveals truth, then confusion is not an obstacle, but a doorway. The collapse of certainty is not failure, but exposure. Truth may not arrive as a conclusion, but as a shift in how experience is allowed to unfold when control is no longer the priority. The self may be a useful fiction. The self may be a useful fiction, not a falsehood in the sense of being meaningless, but a story that works. This idea suggests that the feeling of being a single, continuous me is not an objective feature of reality, but a mental construction designed to organize experience, memory, and behavior. It exists because it is helpful, not because it is true. Your thoughts, emotions, and sensations do not arrive as a unified package. They appear separately, often contradicting one another. The self steps in to claim ownership, tying these fragments together into a coherent narrative. Without that narrative, experience would feel scattered and difficult to manage. With it, life becomes navigable. This becomes unsettling when you notice how flexible the self is. It changes with mood, context, and audience. You feel like a different person when alone, when threatened, when in love. Yet each version feels equally authentic. The self adapts because it is a tool, not a core. Responsibility, memory, and social interaction all rely on this fiction. You need a stable I to plan, to promise, to regret. But usefulness does not imply permanence. The story can weaken, fracture, or dissolve under pressure, illness, or deep introspection. If the self is a fiction, it is one you live inside. It guides behavior and gives meaning, even while hiding its own constructed nature. You are not lying to yourself. You are participating in a narrative that makes experience survivable. What you defend as who you are may simply be the story that has worked well enough to keep going. Experience may outlive identity. Experience may outlive identity, meaning the stream of awareness could continue even after the sense of being someone dissolves. This idea suggests that identity is not required for experience to occur. The stories, memories, and labels that make you feel like a distinct self may be temporary structures, while experience itself persists beyond them. You already encounter moments where identity weakens. In deep absorption, exhaustion, shock, or intense emotion, the internal narrative quiets. The sense of me fades, yet sensations, perceptions, and awareness remain. Experience does not stop when identity loosens. It simply becomes less personal, less narrated. If identity can disappear while experience continues, then the self is not the container of awareness. It is an overlay, something added to experience to create continuity and ownership. When that overlay falls away, awareness does not collapse. It continues without a center. This idea becomes unsettling when you consider endings. Death, memory loss, or radical transformation may not eliminate experience, but strip away identity. What remains would not remember who it was, would not recognize itself as you, yet would still be aware. The fear of annihilation may actually be the fear of losing the self, not of losing experience. If experience outlives identity, then you are not the most fundamental thing happening. Awareness is. Identity comes and goes, but experience flows on, unconcerned with names, histories, or personal narratives. This reframes existence as less personal and more continuous. You are not guaranteed to persist as a self, but experience may continue regardless, unfolding without reference to who it once belonged to. Reality may resist understanding. Reality may resist understanding, not because you lack intelligence, but because it is not structured to be fully comprehended. This idea suggests that the universe is not obligated to make sense to the minds trying to interpret it. Understanding may be a human demand placed on something that never agreed to meet it. Patterns appear just long enough to be useful, then break. Explanations work within limits, then fail without warning. Each layer of understanding reveals deeper complexity rather than closure. The more you learn, the more reality seems to multiply its unanswered questions instead of resolving them. This becomes unsettling when you realize confusion may not be temporary, it may be structural. Some aspects of reality could be inherently resistant to simplification, refusing to collapse into concepts the mind can hold comfortably. Understanding may approach, but never arrive. The mind craves coherence because it depends on it to act. When coherence breaks down, anxiety follows, but reality does not adjust itself to reduce that anxiety. It continues behaving according to its own structure, indifferent to whether it feels intelligible. If reality resists understanding, then uncertainty is not a failure state, but a permanent condition. You are not moving toward final clarity, but navigating a world that remains partially opaque no matter how much you learn. And the effort to understand becomes less about mastery and more about learning how to exist without full resolution. Confusion may signal proximity to truth. confusion may signal proximity to truth rather than distance from it. This idea suggests that disorientation often appears when familiar mental structures can no longer contain what you are encountering. The mind becomes confused not because it has failed, but because it has reached the edge of what it knows how to organize. Clarity feels good because it confirms existing frameworks. Confusion feels threatening because it dissolves them. When something truly new or deep is encountered, it does not fit neatly into old categories. The mind struggles, and that struggle is experienced as confusion. What is breaking is not understanding, but the illusion that understanding was complete. This is unsettling because confusion is usually treated as a problem to be eliminated as quickly as possible. Explanations are rushed in to restore comfort. But in doing so, something important may be lost. Premature clarity can be a retreat, not a breakthrough. Confusion often appears before insight, not after it. It is the moment when assumptions are exposed and certainty weakens. The ground feels unstable because it is being questioned, not because nothing is there. If confusion signals proximity to truth, then discomfort becomes meaningful. The feeling of not knowing may be evidence that something real is pressing against the limits of your current understanding. Truth may not arrive as certainty, but as the quiet realization that the old ways of making sense no longer work.